You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. It's the Mueller report. This is from page 151. According to Nader, Dmitriev was very anxious to connect with the incoming administration and told Nader that he would try other routes to do so besides Nader himself. Nader did not ultimately introduce Dmitriev to anyone associated with the incoming administration during Dmitriev's post-election trip to New York. In early December 2016, Dmitriev again broached the topic of meeting incoming administration officials with Nader in January or February. Dmitriev sent Nader a list of publicly available quotes of Dmitriev speaking positively about Donald Trump in case they were helpful. Subtopic C, Eric Prince and Kirill Dmitriev meet in the Seychelles. Subtopic, George Nader and Eric Prince arrange Seychelles meeting with Dmitriev. Nader traveled to New York in early January 2017 and had lunchtime and dinner meetings with Eric Prince on January 3, 2017. Nader and Prince discussed Dmitriev. Nader informed Prince that the Russians were looking to build a link with the incoming Trump administration, redacted by Bill Barr. He told Prince that Dmitriev had been pushing Nader to introduce him to someone from the incoming administration, redacted by Bill Barr. Nader suggested, in light of Prince's relationship with transition team officials, that Prince and Dmitriev meet to discuss issues of mutual concern, redacted by Bill Barr. Prince told Nader that he needed to think further about it and to check with transition team officials. After his dinner with Prince, Nader sent Prince a link to a Wikipedia entry about Dmitriev and sent Dmitriev a message stating that he had just met, quote, with some key people within the family and inner circle, a reference to Prince, and that he had spoken at length and positively about Dmitriev, page 152. Nader told Dmitriev that the people he had met had asked for Dmitriev's bio, and Dmitriev replied that he would update and send it. Nader later received from Dmitriev 2 files concerning Dmitriev. One was a 2-page biography. The other was a list of Dmitriev's positive quotes about Donald Trump. The next morning, Nader forwarded the message and attachments Dmitriev had sent him to Prince. Nader wrote to Prince that these documents were the versions, quote, to be used with some additional details for them, parenthesis, with them referring to members of the incoming administration. Prince opened the attachments at Trump Tower within an hour of receiving them. Prince stated that while he was at Trump Tower that day, he spoke with Kellyanne Conway, Wilbur Ross, Steve Mnuchin, and others while waiting to see Steve Bannon. Cell site location data for Prince's mobile phone indicates that Prince remained at Trump Tower for approximately 3 hours. Prince said that he did not recall whether during those 3 hours he met with Bannon and discussed Dmitriev with him. And the rest of that paragraph, it was blacked out by Bill Barr. Prince booked a ticket to the Seychelles on January 7, 2017. The following day, Nader wrote to Dmitriev that he had a, quote, pleasant surprise for him, namely that he had arranged for Dmitriev to meet a special guest from the new team, referring to Prince. Nader asked Dmitriev if he would come to the Seychelles for the meeting on January 12, 2017, and Dmitriev agreed. The following day, Dmitriev sought assurance from Nader that the Seychelles meeting would be worthwhile. Blocked out. Next part is blocked out by Bill Barr. Dmitriev was not enthusiastic about the idea of meeting with Prince, and that Nader assured him that Prince wielded influence with the incoming administration. Page 153. Nader wrote to Dmitriev, "This guy Prince is designated by Steve Bannon is designated to meet you. I know him, and he is very well connected and trusted by the new team. His sister is now a minister of education." According to Nader, Prince had led him to believe that Bannon was aware of Prince's upcoming meeting with Dmitriev, and Prince acknowledged that it was fair for Nader to think that Prince would pass information on to the transition team. Bannon, however, told the Mueller office that Prince did not tell him in advance about his meeting with Dmitriev. Subtitle 2, the Seychelles meeting. Dmitriev arrived with his wife in the Seychelles on January 11, 2017, and checked into the Four Seasons Resort, where Crown Prince Mohammed and Nader were staying. Prince arrived that same day. Prince and Dmitriev met for the first time that afternoon in Nader's villa with Nader present. The initial meeting lasted approximately 30 to 45 minutes. Next paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. Prince described the 8 years of the Obama administration in negative terms and stated that he is looking forward to a new era of cooperation and conflict resolution. According to Prince, he told Dmitriev that Bannon was effective, if not conventional, and that Prince provided policy papers to Bannon. And the entire rest of page 153 was blacked out by Bill Barr. The first part of page 154, the first third, was blocked out by Bill Barr. Except for one sentence. The topic of Russian interference in the 2016 election did not come up. The next sentence was blocked out by Bill Barr. Then Prince added that he would inform Bannon about his meeting with Dmitriev, and that if there was interest in continuing the conversation, Bannon or someone else on the transition team would do so. And then the rest of that paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. Afterwards, Prince returned to his room, where he learned that a Russian aircraft carrier had sailed to Libya, which led him to call Nader and ask him to set up another meeting with Dmitriev. According to Nader, Prince called and said he had checked with his associates back home and needed to convey to Dmitriev that Libya was, quote, off the table. Nader wrote to Dmitriev that Prince had received an urgent message that he needs to convey to you immediately, and arranged for himself, Dmitriev, and Prince to meet at a restaurant on the Four Seasons property. At the second meeting, Prince told Dmitriev that the United States could not accept any Russian involvement in Libya because it would make the situation there much worse. And the rest of that page is blocked out by Bill Barr. Page 155, the first paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. After the brief second meeting concluded, Nader and Dmitriev discussed what had just transpired. Dmitriev told Nader that he was disappointed. It's the Mueller report.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's Wednesday. It's the first hour of our program, so let's check in with Congressman Mark Pocan. Time for Middays with Mark. He is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin brilliantly in the House of Representatives. His website is pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep, as in Representative, Rep, R-E-P, Mark Pocan, spelled just like it sounds. Congressman, welcome back.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be here.
Great having you with us. I'm sorry we didn't have an opportunity to touch base. We had some technical stuff going on here just before the program. So, what's at the top of your mind here as we start this day? What are the issues that you think are, important? What's going on in Congress? What are the things we should be attending to?
Yeah, well, we're back for the next 3 weeks in Congress. We're going to be passing a couple of authorizations, the intelligence and the national defense authorization. A lot of progressive amendments we have to that we're hoping that we can get added. Also, we'll be passing the minimum wage increase in the next 3 weeks. So looking forward to that. That's one of the priorities our caucus had, the Democratic caucus had. And, of course, dealing with all the fallout of the situation still at the border and the conditions for the children. And I'll be going on a CODEL actually down to Homestead down in Florida on Monday myself to look at the conditions firsthand.
Wow. So, what are you seeing as? I mean, do you think that this situation on the border? I was reading a piece this morning, and forgive me, I don't recall exactly where. I read a lot of stuff for the show prep. That was suggesting that a survey of Republicans, over 50% of Republicans, indicated that they think what Trump is doing on the border, fully informed, is the right thing. Locking up kids in cages and stuff. They're just like, so, I guess, opposed to brown people. I don't know, but how do we deal with this?
Well, the good news is we had a poll a few weeks ago we saw, and no matter how you tested Donald Trump's message on the border, the best he got to was like 41%. And our message, the worst we got to, was 61%. So I think most real people, not just, that was a poll of Republicans, but independents and Democrats, when you start looking and expanding that to everybody, most people have someone in their family that was an immigrant. They know that they came to this country, had opportunities. That's why they're here with their opportunities. And I think that message isn't working. So you're right. For a certain part that doesn't like people with skin colors darker than their own, that's the way that they're going to think. But when you take in everybody, they're not winning with that message. And I think that's a really positive statement about the country, that we're not winning with that message.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. Well, I've got 5 calls on the line here so far, and our call screener, I'm not sure what's going on back there. She hasn't had an opportunity to call screen any of them, so I'm just going to put people on the air here. And the first is you're in the 608 area code. I've got your phone. It ends in 7178. If you tell us what your name is and where you're calling from, you've got a question for Congressman Pocan?
Yeah, my name's Dave. I'm calling from Evansville, Wisconsin. Mark is my congressman. Mark, I wish you could see me because you would recognize me. Every time you see me on the street or at your place of business, you call me by my name. I cannot begin to tell you how angry I am with you and all of the Democratic caucus. Nancy Pelosi apparently believes that it's my responsibility to get rid of a criminal president, a president who is so criminal we can all see him committing crimes every single day. And I don't know if Nancy Pelosi remembers who I am, because I'm the guy she always comes to whenever she runs a Republican-like candidate that she wants me to vote for because she calls them progressive.
Okay, got the rant. Let's let Congressman Pocan respond.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure, Tom, unfortunately, what Dave's rant is. I know he's not happy with Leader Pelosi. I'm assuming not proceeding on an impeachment hearing. Over 80 of us, including myself, Dave, so I don't know why you'd be mad at me, have said we should start the impeachment inquiry, but we're not there with the leader yet. And I think a big day will be in about another week when we have Mr. Mueller appear before Congress. And hopefully that will be well watched, and we can get the message across that we need to do more. But our problem has been a lot of the witnesses have not been coming in because Donald Trump has not been letting them. That alone should tell people that he's not innocent, right? If he doesn't want people to come testify, you don't look very innocent when you block people. But we're still trying to get our leadership to be there. But you've got 80 House Democrats now saying, let's start the inquiry so we can get more witnesses to come. I understand you may have a disagreement with Ms. Pelosi, but I wouldn't blame all Democrats, especially as that number keeps growing.
Yeah. Smitty in Hawaii, in a town I can't pronounce the name of. You want to tell us your town, Smitty?
It's Tom again. Obi Tom Kenobi again. It is Kaunakakai.
Thank you, Kaunakakai. I got it. Congressman, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, I just want to go along with the first caller. Welcome to the United States of Amnesia. I remember Darrell Issa saying he was going to hold hearings and investigations every day on the Obama administration. Jordan, Meadows, and McCarthy, if Hillary had been elected, they were going to start impeachments from day one. I think your biggest challenge is to get the other 150 or 60 some odd Democratic representatives to get on the impeachment inquiry bandwagon. Every single day it's something different, and we're not going to have a democracy left. Bill Barr is a crooked on the take. Mnuchin, McConnell, Elaine Chao, now Alex Acosta, all the way down the line. The EPA, the Interior Department. I mean, it's all hell in a handbasket. But thank you for your good work. You're certainly a Jedi. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Smitty. I think next week will be really pivotal. I think when you have Bob Mueller finally appearing before Congress, even though I believe it's a limited amount of time we have him for, it will be one of the most important moments around this entire issue. And I think being able to ask some questions and hopefully get some honest, clear answers, especially about what's in the report, hopefully will be another catalyst we need to get farther down this process. So, the number keeps growing of the House Democrats asking for an impeachment inquiry. Every time the president blocks us somewhere else, you've got more people jumping on that. But let's wait for next week and see if that can help move our leadership, because right now, Leader Pelosi is very clear she doesn't intend to start the impeachment process.
Larry in Melbourne, Florida. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Is that me?
That's you.
Okay, it's a pleasure, gentlemen. I have an idea for progressives for the next year.
Go ahead.
It's to declare 2020 the year of the worker.
We're listening, Larry.
Okay. And then you take May Day, and we all know the significance of May Day. You probably go on for 20 minutes about May Day. But we need to have a big celebration in Washington.
Okay, for International Workers' Day, Congressman?
Yes, I think, Larry, I think that's part of the message that we've been trying to say, and what we did run on last fall was, to get rid of the culture of corruption in Washington that's working against the average person, the average worker in the country. We talked about raising the wage, and then we're going to do that in the next few weeks, and I think that's really important. I wish we had more we could do and actually see pass through Congress to help people unionize, because I think that also is an important way to highlight the worker. And then also we're dealing with health care, which, again, for most workers who especially don't have that as a benefit, we're trying to address that concern. But I hear what you're saying. We try to talk about it from the perspective of the kitchen table, what people talk about, and I think economics and working issues are right on top.
Yeah, amen. We'll be back. It's Congressman Mark Pocan for the hour, taking your calls, Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program every Wednesday. And you can reach his website at pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin, and he's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Your opportunity to talk to one of the big cheese progressives in the U.S. House of Representatives. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan right after this. And welcome back. Morris in Long Beach, California, listening on KPFK. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan, Morris.
Hello, Professor. Please forgive me. I'm on speakerphone, but I hope I'm close enough to the phone where you can hear me.
Yep, sounds good.
Stick with Nancy Pelosi. She's got a good plan. When she gets this stuff on TV, every Republican's going to run like a cockroach when the lights turn on from darkness. I'm a little concerned, too, but I see what her plan is. When the election go down and this stuff is on TV about this criminal family, I think people are going to change their opinion about this psychopath in the White House. Just stick with it just a little bit longer. Thank you.
Yeah, Morris, and I think the reason why so many people on this program call in and why 80 of us are concerned here is that a lot of those people aren't able to come and testify because they're not being able to because President Trump won't allow them, and we can't get them on TV. So that's the real conundrum we're in. How do you compel witnesses to come and do just that, tell what they know and answer questions so that it is on TV so that people will actually see it? And I agree with you. At that point, we win. But we got to figure out how to get those witnesses, and I think that's the real political issue we're having, which is why many of us are saying we need to get more witnesses, and the only way you do that is to start the impeachment inquiry.
Tamara in Carl Junction, Missouri. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Congressman Pocan. My question is, while you're down there looking at Homestead, there's another one that they just opened up for only teenage girls. It's 9 miles from Mar-a-Lago, and it's run by the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. I'd like to know if you're going to try and get in there and see what's happening in this place, because with all that's going on with Jeffrey Epstein and Trump and Mar-a-Lago and young teenagers, this kind of bothered me that it just announced it July 4th that they opened this facility for teen girls only.
Wow.
Yeah, Tamara, I hear you. This Codell will not, because we just have Monday until 2 o'clock, and we have to fly in because we have session Monday night. We have votes at 6:30, so there's no way we could get to all those facilities on Monday. But because it's the subcommittee on appropriation that has jurisdiction over human services, we will for sure get to the Homestead facility, but I'll raise this issue. I'm sure other members in Florida who are visiting facilities could visit that. So I don't think that no one will get there. It's just for this particular trip, given the time we have, we've got about a 5-hour period, not even a 5-hour period, because we'll have to fly out at 2. We'll mainly get to Homestead.
Omar in Herndon, Virginia. We have 1 minute to the break. Omar, quick question for Congressman Pocan.
Just regarding the Saudi arm deals, I thought there was a bill passed that prevents Saudi from American equipment being used in the war in Yemen, but somehow they were able to secure an arms deal, including Boeing, Raytheon, and Lockheed Martin, for almost $3 billion. I mean, how did that happen?
Yeah, Omar, I apologize. I had a hard time hearing.
He said that there was legislation to block Saudi Arabia from using U.S. weapons in Yemen, and yet they just got this huge $3.5 billion arms deal, and they're using it against Yemen. How did that happen?
The legislation was vetoed that we had around giving Congress a say, and the other legislation, I think, has just passed the Senate. It's going to be an amendment on the NDAA authorization, the National Defense Authorization, this week, but there's been nothing that's fully been passed into law. That's probably why, Omar.
So the one that was passed was vetoed by Trump.
Well, that was to have Congress have a say. I think the Senate might have taken up a bill that we haven't had in the House yet, but we're adding it to NDA this week, but nothing that's gone through the entire process yet.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you. Congressman Pocan is with us, taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan in just a moment. Welcome back. It's Middays with Mark. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and represents the 2nd District of the state of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. Steve in Napa, California, listening on 9:10 a.m. out of San Francisco. Steve, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen. Question basically is, my understanding is that Iran years ago proposed a deal for a nuclear-free Middle East zone. If Israel would agree to give up their nuclear weapons, that they would give up their own nuclear weapons program. Has there been any discussion in Washington about that? We don't seem to hear much about it.
Yeah, Steve, I don't know if I've even ever heard of that specifically, so I really can't address that. I don't know of any proposal ever made like that.
Okay. Nick in Buffalo, New York. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, Congressman, thanks for taking my call. I just read that in Iowa they are going to move to virtual caucuses, and I think in Nevada too, but I don't know the details there. But it looks like only 10% of the delegates are going to go to those virtual ones. So it seems to me like this is just kind of setting us up as a Democratic Party for a bunch of conflict.
Wait a second. Nick, isn't it that they're going to, or Congressman, isn't it just that they're going to let people, particularly disabled people or people who have a hard time physically showing up, to phone in and come in by telephone, which is going to expand the number of people participating in the caucus rather than diminishing it, like Nick is suggesting?
Yeah, I don't know if there are any other specifics, but that's as I understood it. I've been to the Iowa caucus several times, and it's a lengthy process. I do think there's a pretty fair discussion point about, the fact that we have closed primaries, open primaries, and caucuses. Those are all very different animals. But I don't know of anything that's going to take away from the integrity of the Iowa caucus from the proposal that I've seen.
Yeah, same here. Stephen in Albuquerque, New Mexico. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, Congressman. I have a nephew that worked here in New Mexico on the Epstein Ranch. And Jeffrey Epstein's staff was very well aware of some of the things he was doing with underage women. One of the things that was discussed amongst the people he worked with was how Donald Trump and Bill Clinton used to use his jet for common things like going on charity runs in other countries for the Clinton Foundation, and how Trump and Clinton would also use the jet to go down to Central America for God knows what was going on there with young girls and brothels. Do you know anything of this? And shouldn't this go to the top of the list of things we investigate about this guy?
Yeah, well, I think what we're going to see come out of New York is going to be expansive from everything I'm hearing. What I have seen is Bill Clinton has said that on behalf of the foundation, I think he did take a number like 4 or 5 flights. I have not seen that with Donald Trump, although I know Donald Trump has been at parties at his home going back, I think, a couple decades. But this has been very thoroughly done in the court system, and I think we will see more information that comes out of that. And but I've heard no stories about people going to different countries or other things that weren't related to the foundation or other
Yeah, we really don't know
cases
about
of
Trump.
Donald Trump.
Clinton has issued
Yeah.
a statement saying exactly when he was on Epstein's plane and who was with him, and it was his staff and people on the board of his foundation every single time. And Clinton has said, I didn't know anything about this. We haven't heard from Trump, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Alice in Aurora, Illinois, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman. I just don't understand how people can refuse a subpoena. My question is, why aren't individuals who refuse subpoenas facing jail time?
And I'd like to add to that, if I may, Congressman. Susan McDougal went to prison for years, as I recall, for refusing to testify before a grand jury that was, Ken Starr's grand jury that was looking into Bill Clinton. Now, I realize a grand jury is different from Congress, but let me add that to her question, I guess.
And I think it's either this afternoon or tomorrow. We actually have a meeting with the attorney for the House to get more details on this. But I know from previous conversations, they've said, they're leaving all options open as they move forward. But it's still the legal process, and it can take a very long time to get there, which is, again, why some of us would prefer to do the impeachment inquiry, because that gives us a few more levers to compel people to come. But there are various consequences from imprisonment to fining and other things, and hopefully we'll have a little better idea what direction they're looking at moving in the very near future.
Amir in Los Angeles, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. We have about a little over a minute to the break.
Yes, hello, Congressman. I'm very much for impeaching, or at least starting the impeachment process, because then a lot of facts do come out. However, I think before doing that, there should be a resolution that the Congress reserves the right that there would be no more wars, because otherwise, Trump, if the seat gets too hot, then he may take us to war. And then once he takes us to war, then a lot of people start rallying behind him because, they feel threatened, that we are at war, so we should keep quiet.
Yeah, Amir, and that's why I think in the
war with Iran.
Yeah, Amir, and that's why in the National Defense Bill we're putting specific language around Iran and in some other specific instances for this very reason. But at the end of the day, we need to change our AUMF that is too wide open, that allows presidents, doesn't matter if they're Democrats or Republicans, too much latitude to go to war without consulting Congress, which is what Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says. So share your concerns, and a lot of us were a little worried with what he's doing in Iran right now. Could be for that very reason. But we do have some language that we're going to be moving forward this week to deal with some of that.
Was that late 2001, maybe early 2002 authorization to use military force, the AUMF, was that passed by reconciliation? Did that only last for 10 years, or has it been renewed, or does it has no expiration date?
I believe it has no expiration date. I've never heard anything that there's a date that's it ended in 10 years and it's still open.
Yeah.
The problem is we need to actually proactively change it, and we haven't been able to do that.
Yeah, I get it. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He represents the 2nd District of the state of Wisconsin. His website, Pocan, POCAN.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan, as in Representative Mark Pocan. And we will be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. It's the Mueller report. This is from page 151. According to Nader, Dmitriev was very anxious to connect with the incoming administration and told Nader that he would try other routes to do so besides Nader himself. Nader did not ultimately introduce Dmitriev to anyone associated with the incoming administration during Dmitriev's post-election trip to New York. In early December 2016, Dmitriev again broached the topic of meeting incoming administration officials with Nader in January or February. Dmitriev sent Nader a list of publicly available quotes of Dmitriev speaking positively about Donald Trump in case they were helpful. Subtopic C, Eric Prince and Kirill Dmitriev meet in the Seychelles. Subtopic, George Nader and Eric Prince arrange Seychelles meeting with Dmitriev. Nader traveled to New York in early January 2017 and had lunchtime and dinner meetings with Eric Prince on January 3rd, 2017. Nader and Prince discussed Dmitriev. Nader informed Prince that the Russians were looking to build a link with the incoming Trump administration, redacted by Bill Barr. He told Prince that Dmitriev had been pushing Nader to introduce him to someone from the incoming administration, redacted by Bill Barr. Nader suggested, in light of Prince's relationship with transition team officials, that Prince and Dmitriev meet to discuss issues of mutual concern, redacted by Bill Barr. Prince told Nader that he needed to think further about it and to check with transition team officials. After his dinner with Prince, Nader sent Prince a link to a Wikipedia entry about Dmitriev and sent Dmitriev a message stating that he had just met, quote, with some key people within the family and inner circle, a reference to Prince, and that he had spoken at length and positively about Dmitriev, page 152. Nader told Dmitriev that the people he had met had asked for Dmitriev's bio, and Dmitriev replied that he would update and send it. Nader later received from Dmitriev 2 files concerning Dmitriev. One was a 2-page biography. The other was a list of Dmitriev's positive quotes about Donald Trump. The next morning, Nader forwarded the message and attachments Dmitriev had sent him to Prince. Nader wrote to Prince that these documents were the versions, quote, to be used with some additional details for them, parenthesis, with them referring to members of the incoming administration. Prince opened the attachments at Trump Tower within an hour of receiving them. Prince stated that while he was at Trump Tower that day, he spoke with Kellyanne Conway, Wilbur Ross, Steve Mnuchin, and others while waiting to see Steve Bannon. Cell site location data for Prince's mobile phone indicates that Prince remained at Trump Tower for approximately 3 hours. Prince said that he did not recall whether during those 3 hours he met with Bannon and discussed Dmitriev with him. And the rest of that paragraph, it was blacked out by Bill Barr. Prince booked a ticket to the Seychelles on January 7, 2017. The following day, Nader wrote to Dmitriev that he had a, quote, pleasant surprise for him, namely that he had arranged for Dmitriev to meet a special guest from the new team, referring to Prince. Nader asked Dmitriev if he would come to the Seychelles for the meeting on January 12, 2017, and Dmitriev agreed. The following day, Dmitriev sought assurance from Nader that the Seychelles meeting would be worthwhile. Blocked out. Next part is blocked out by Bill Barr. Dmitriev was not enthusiastic about the idea of meeting with Prince, and that Nader assured him that Prince wielded influence with the incoming administration. Page 153. Nader wrote to Dmitriev, "This guy Prince is designated by Steve Bannon is designated to meet you. I know him, and he is very well connected and trusted by the new team. His sister is now a minister of education." According to Nader, Prince had led him to believe that Bannon was aware of Prince's upcoming meeting with Dmitriev, and Prince acknowledged that it was fair for Nader to think that Prince would pass information on to the transition with Dmitriev, and Prince acknowledged that it was fair for Nader to think that Prince would pass information on to the transition team. Bannon, however, told the Mueller office that Prince did not tell him in advance about his meeting with Dmitriev. Subtitle 2, the Seychelles meeting. Dmitriev arrived with his wife in the Seychelles on January 11, 2017, and checked into the Four Seasons Resort, where Crown Prince Mohammed and Nader were staying. Prince arrived that same day. Prince and Dmitriev met for the first time that afternoon in Nader's villa with Nader present. The initial meeting lasted approximately 30 to 45 minutes. Next paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. Prince described the 8 years of the Obama administration in negative terms and stated that he was looking forward to a new era of cooperation and conflict resolution. According to Prince, he told Dmitriev that Bannon was effective, if not conventional, and that Prince provided policy papers to Bannon. And the entire rest of page 153 was blacked out by Bill Barr. The first part of page 154, the first third, was blocked out by Bill Barr. Except for one sentence. The topic of Russian interference in the 2016 election did not come up. The next sentence was blocked out by Bill Barr. Then Prince added that he would inform Bannon about his meeting with Dmitriev, and that if there was interest in continuing the conversation, Bannon or someone else on the transition team would do so. And then the rest of that paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. Afterwards, Prince returned to his room, where he learned that a Russian aircraft carrier had sailed to Libya, which led him to call Nader and ask him to set up another meeting with Dmitriev. According to Nader, Prince called and said he had checked with his associates back home and needed to convey to Dmitriev that Libya was, quote, off the table. Nader wrote to Dmitriev that Prince had received an urgent message that he needs to convey to you immediately, and arranged for himself, Dmitriev, and Prince to meet at a restaurant on the Four Seasons property. At the second meeting, Prince told Dmitriev that the United States could not accept any Russian involvement in Libya because it would make the situation there much worse. And the rest of that page is blocked out by Bill Barr. Page 155, the first paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. After the brief second meeting concluded, Nader and Dmitriev discussed what had transpired. Dmitriev told Nader that he was disappointed. It's the Mueller report. Welcome back. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. Jackie in Sierra Vista, Arizona, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, this is a question for you, Tom, and also Congressman Pocan. Oh, by the way, I used to live in Wisconsin. I needed some sun, so I came to Arizona. Now I live along the border. My question was regarding the border. It seems that we hear so little about the reasons, aside from the climate crisis, of why so many people are coming from Central America and how we, through our former policies, have anything to do with those reasons. Can you say anything about that, or can more information be provided?
Yeah, Jackie, I think that's one of the main reasons that's put out there is, at least in two of the countries, the violence. Third, somewhat it's from the government on down. But El Salvador is a classic example. Is you may know, in California, a lot of the gangs that people were deported decades ago from the United States are now in El Salvador, and that helped breed some of the violence and situations they have, especially in San Salvador, where the conditions are especially unsafe because of folks that we sent there who got involved in gangs in the United States first. And you know, one of the things that concerns us most when we pull back funding from those countries, as Donald Trump has proposed, is we should be helping those countries to stop the violence they have in those countries, which is the main reason why people are leaving and coming up here. It's for their own survival. So that has come through when I've talked to people at the border personally. You hear these stories about the violence, and you know, we need the media really to focus on those stories, as you mentioned, Jackie, because it really shows we could be doing a whole lot more to stop it than we currently are to have people coming here.
I think she was also referencing the Reagan administration's role in this with Elliot Abrams and Ollie North, the guys that
Going
Bill
back,
Barr
yep.
counseled Bush to pardon in '92, and a bunch of the others, the gang down there that was just robbing, raping, and pillaging basically.
Yeah.
So anyhow, let's see here. Margot in Lynxville, Wisconsin. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Oh, God, I'm calling you from probably the butthole of Wisconsin.
All right. I'm sorry, Margot, but we're not gonna go with language like that. Linda in Coconut Creek, Florida. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you, Tom. Hi, Congressman. Thank you for taking my call. I have a quick question for you. I did call Tom a couple of weeks ago on my insurance. I work for the post office. My insurance is underwritten by Cigna. And my problem is my surgery everything was approved. Everything from the surgeon to the hospital to the room. Now, all of a sudden, the insurance company is playing games with people, and I can't be the only one going through this. It's called the neo-monitoring unit used in my surgery for my neck. I had fusion surgery, and they will not approve it. It's $12,453 that they're not going to approve. It's got to come out of my pocket. How can they be doing this to people? And my question is, what are we going to do to change it? And are we going to have help with some laws that are going to help us? Because people will not go out and have surgeries, is what I'm basically saying. I'll get off the air for you, and if you answer the question. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks for all
Linda,
your help.
so I think in that little snippet, I don't have enough information to give you a good answer other than you should call your member of Congress or you're a senator, and they might be able to help you. We get a lot of requests like that in our district. As you know, every House member has a little over 700,000 constituents, and you have your U.S. senators. But I would reach out and see what they can do. I just don't have enough information with the snippet you've given me to give you, I think, a credible answer.
There's also state insurance regulators. I don't know if you can contact them or lodge complaints with them or not, but I know that every state has
a member of Congress's office at least can help you navigate to the right places. And again, I don't know Florida law, so I think I would try there as a first start.
Makes perfect sense. Rick in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, my question deals with how come I, as a citizen, and I witnessed a crime, and I'm subpoenaed and I refuse to go, they'll have someone come knock on my door and physically escort me into the courtroom. So I'm wondering, how come we don't have some type of legislation that can do such a thing, regardless of what Mr. Trump does, or fine them. So fine them something, because the congressmen need to be held at a higher priority. So I think, why not have it like, well, if you don't show up, there's going to be a $100,000 fine. I mean, as crazy as that sounds, they need to be held to a higher character, and they need to be escorted either out of Congress or be taken from their home, physically escorted in to testify, even if you got to hold them in custody. Why can't this be done?
Yeah, and I think that's part of a briefing I mentioned we're going to have either today or tomorrow. I'm forgetting which, where we're getting more information on just that. I think it's tomorrow, actually, on just that, to figure out where we are with. We have a lot of lawsuits right now. We're trying to get our tax records and other things, but on the people violating subpoenas, I first learned that we had a jail in the U.S. Capitol a few months back, thanks to what's happened with people being unwilling to come and appear when they have a subpoena, which to the average person around the country means you have to show up. Why are they allowed to somehow get around this? And you can fine, and there are other things you can do. And we need to use every measure to make people come. And if that measure means also an impeachment inquiry, we need to do that, because at the end of the day, we need to have witnesses come and talk about Don McGahn, for example. The president has repeatedly said he'd never asked him to fire Mueller. Yet if you read the Mueller report, he asked him to get rid of him. He shouldn't be there. He's got to go. Every way you say fire without saying the word fire was very clear, and I think you'll get that richness out of having him come as a witness, which is why we need him to come. And I think we needed to use every possible way to get people to be compelled to come here as possible. And I think, Rick, you bring up many good points.
Yvette in Richmond, California. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, I was listening to you read the Mueller report, and then you have parts where it's blocked out. I'm wondering if when Mueller goes to testify, will he be able to elaborate on the parts that Barr blocked out?
Good question.
Yeah, I doubt he will be able to talk about things that are blacked out in a public setting, because this is going to be a public setting. But there is so much that can be asked about the parts that aren't blocked out that can be very helpful for Congress and for the American people to know what he was trying to convey in that report. So I just rest assured that is going to be a very, very interesting hearing, and I doubt that much else will be happening of interest during that time period on the 17th, because a lot could come out of that.
Karen in Rossford, Ohio. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman. I have a question about the detention centers. Hearing about how these children are packed in these rooms and there's standing room only, and they have to wait for somebody to get up before they can lay down, aren't they in violation of the fire codes? Aren't they in violation of the maximum occupancy for a room and for a building? These can't be safe. If a fire breaks out, there's no way that these can be safe.
Yeah, and so if I can, Karen, some of what we're trying to do, some of the facilities have various waivers because of the emergency type usage of them. One of the things we had 2 weeks ago as provisions in the emergency supplemental for money to the border was to have the same Flores agreement conditions to all facilities everywhere, private or public, and that contractors who violate that could lose their contracts. And unfortunately, the Senate version wound up being taken up by the House in the end, and we lost those protections. As I understand it, the leader is looking towards members right now to come up with a bill that had some of those standards so we can try to pass that still and try to move it forward. But the difference is that was must-pass legislation and could have become law, and whatever we pass out of the House may never get through the Senate. So we do need to have better protections for all facilities, and part of that is going to be incumbent on Congress to take some action.
Mike in Fairview, Michigan. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thanks, Tom. Congressman, my question kind of deals with what Tom had said earlier in the week about the standing army at peacetime. that vote on that bill, I can't understand where these Democrats are coming from unless they live in a state where they get a lot of funding from the military. That's my question, sir. Thank you for your service.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mike. I didn't get the question. I apologize.
Earlier in the week, I was talking about how the Second Amendment was written in part because the founders did not want there to be a standing army during times of peace, because they'd seen so many overthrow countries in Europe, and therefore Article 1, Section 8 says that the army may not be funded for more than 2 years, basically forcing Congress to reevaluate whether or not to have an army every 2 years.
Yeah, and essentially that's what we're doing this week in the House. Senate's already done it, but that's the National Defense Authorization, or known as the NDAA. And there are like 800 amendments, I think, that were submitted, many progressive amendments, and that vote will likely be by the end of the week.
Okay. Jill in Princeton, Minnesota. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Mark Pocan, our hero. Move to amend. You are the co-sponsor. Corporations.
Yep, corporations are not people.
Other
Money is
than
not free speech.
people.
So, Jill, what's your question?
Is not free speech. Mark Pocan, my question. How do we spread this news? And by the way, I am from Lakes area, Move to Amend, Brainerd, Minnesota, and we have put on a display for the 4th of July, and we are in cahoots with the 28th Amendment, the We the People Amendment.
Okay, Jill, thank you. Congressman?
Yeah, so, Move to Amend, I think, has been a really great grassroots movement, Tom, around the country. In Wisconsin, they come into a lot of communities and put on the ballot essentially just that. Corporations are not people. Money is not free speech. And the votes come overwhelmingly positive for just that, which is what we've been trying to do to overturn Citizens United. If you had something as simple and direct as that, one, you would have a much better chance to regain your democracy and be able to stop the dark, ugly, hidden money that infiltrates our campaigns. And the bill that she talked about is one of the major vehicles to do just that.
It's 46 minutes past the hour. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. Congressman Mark Pocan, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, also representative for the 2nd District of Wisconsin, is taking your calls for the hour. His website is pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at @RepMarkPocan. And we'll be back in just a moment with more of your calls for the Congressman.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Representative Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. Back in just a moment. And welcome back. Michael in Seattle, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello.
Hey, you're on the air.
Thank you, Tom, as always. I'm very curious about the Progressive Caucus and how they have responded to, or are they going to respond to, the platforms that Marianne Williamson and Mike Gravel have put on their websites. And after reading most of the platform possibilities from the 20-plus Democratic hopefuls, these two people are the only one that I can tell are actually have a progressive platform. And I wanted to know if the lead of the Progressive Caucus had anything to say about that. And I'll be happy to get off the air so I can watch you guys on TV.
Thank you, Michael.
Michael, so we pretty much are willing to work with any of the presidential candidates. We would like to see the most progressive public policy out there, and I think we've actually had quite a bit of progressive public policy out there in the debates by the candidates. We're helping to be able to know what bills have been introduced, what some of the more innovative policy might be. But I've seen it come from a lot of candidates, and anyone who would, I think, say that Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren isn't progressive, I would have a huge disagreement with, because I think much of what they've done their entire careers on has been enormously progressive public policy. So we are happy when every candidate puts it out there. Doesn't matter who it is, but I don't think it's quite as narrow a field, perhaps, Michael, as you just defined.
James in Lakewood, Washington. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, gentlemen. Hey, I'm still chuckling about that Thom Kenobi. That's funny. Okay. Anyway, hey, what I noticed on with the debates and each one of the candidates that were in there were touching. They were jumping around it, but weren't landing on it because it's a big subject. We've got many subjects, and that is leveling the playing field. And Tom rants about that from now on, from time to time, and that would make a really good bumper sticker, along with Thom Kenobi. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Leveling the playing field.
Yeah, I mean, James, I think anything that appeals in a populist, progressive way is a smart message, because from every poll we see, those issues have well over 60% support on just about every issue. Another thing I would love to see candidates talk about is how we're going to reduce defense spending in this country. I mean, as much as I think there's going to be a lot of first-time good progressive amendments added to the National Defense Authorization this week, it's also going to be the highest number we've ever had, and we have a Democratic majority that's going to be passing that bill, and that is of concern to many of us on the progressive side. So I think I'm going to be looking for candidates who can actually maybe propose some ideas about how we can put that those extra resources into other things that we need desperately to have done in this country, and I haven't seen much of that yet by the candidates.
We'll be right back. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. Pocan.house.gov, the website. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. And he's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. Welcome back. Janice in Borrego Springs, California. Am I saying that right, Janice? You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you for taking my call. My question is, why is Duncan Hunter, who represents the 50th Congressional District in California and who is accused of taking thousands and thousands of dollars illegally out of his campaign fund for all kinds of frivolous things, why is he still a congressman?
Yeah,
Couldn't he have been asked to step down? Couldn't they force him to step down so we have some representation out here in the 50th?
Yeah, well, you still have representation. He still has a vote on the floor, but he is under an ethics investigation, and until that investigation is completed, he's presumed innocent, I guess, until guilty. But there's no question when you look at the overwhelming evidence, his days are numbered, and it's really a question of whether he decides to leave and the court process will continue, or the ethics committee here will have some kind of a verdict soon. And but clearly, when you send your rabbit around the country as a pet on planes at campaign expense and take your family to Italy and all the other things that he did, it's pretty damning information. I think he'll have a different member of Congress very soon.
Lydia in Hemet, California. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi. I wanted to ask a question why Mitch McConnell spends all day bringing his nominations for the court to the floor, and the Democrats keep voting for them. What are we going to end up with Mitch McConnell?
Yeah, Lydia, I'll tell you, that's the only thing that they're doing in the Senate right now. Mitch McConnell is killing every bill, every good bill we send out of the House, refuses to take up, isn't even doing the appropriations process right now, like we've almost completely finished in the House side, which is going to put us at a potential shutdown again at the end of September, and all he's doing is passing very conservative judges. And I think it's a real problem that we're seeing out of the Senate, and part of why Mitch McConnell found himself an opponent this week, and why people are rightfully so pointing out that we need to make a change in the U.S. Senate to stop this from happening.
Jeff in Portland, Oregon. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for taking my call, Tom and Congressman Pocan. Okay, Congressman, you're for an impeachment inquiry. Tom's for it. I'm for it. An overwhelming majority of Democratic voters are for it. But Nancy Pelosi, in response recently to a question from Maureen Dowd, said, you can't impeach everyone. Well, of course, we're not talking about everyone. We're talking about the guy whom over 1,000 federal prosecutors say has obstructed justice, and that's probably just the tip of the iceberg. So, Congressman, if Speaker Pelosi remains unchanged by public opinion, is the Progressive Caucus prepared to oust her and put in a speaker who will do his or her job and uphold what remains of our shredded democracy? As the saying goes, no guts, no glory.
Yeah, Jeff, so first of all, you brought up a majority of Democratic voters. There's also independent Republican voters. So I don't know if that fact alone is enough to sway members of Congress to say we need a new speaker. So, I think while there is a growing number of members, and the leader will have to see that as this happens, right now she's not there yet. So the votes aren't there to make Nancy Pelosi not the speaker. I don't think any single issue should be enough of a reason to not make someone a speaker. We have our job to try to persuade her why this is important. But honestly, I think next week is going to be pivotal when Bob Mueller speaks, and I think it's important that people speak out, and we need to have the grassroots send that message. I think that's the single best way to see a change in policy.
Paul in Taos, New Mexico. Minute and a half to the end of the hour, by the way. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, thank you, Congressman. If I can express just a little frustration, I do have a question. And by the way, the problem in the Senate is not Mitch McConnell, it's Chuck Schumer. And the problem in the House is Nancy Pelosi. And two things, I guarantee you, low-hanging fruit. They cannot pick low-hanging fruit. We have the law on our side to have his tax return.
Paul, you have 15 seconds to ask a question.
And then to play out the clock, and then there's going to be an election. And guess what? If we can't...
Okay, Congressman, you want to respond to Paul?
I didn't get a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there was no question, as far as I could tell. But we have 30 seconds. So what are your thoughts on how this is? Obviously he's talking about impeachment and taking on Trump. How do you think this is playing out?
Again, I think Donald Trump is doing plenty on his own that's going to affect his future, whether it be in the election or. I agree. We need to start impeachment inquiry here, but the leader's not there, and the majority of Democrats haven't said that yet, who are in the majority. So I think we're going to have to continue to make our case in public advocacy through the grassroots. But next week is going to be pivotal, and I think that day with Mr. Mueller, I think much of the country is going to stop and watch that, and let's hope that will be a catalyst for the change we all want.
Yeah, and meanwhile, if the majority of Democrats start saying we want an impeachment hearing, that might influence Nancy Pelosi. So people should call the Democratic members of Congress and ask them where they stand, right?
Absolutely. Should always contact your elected officials on any issue you feel strongly about.
Great. Congressman Mark Pocan, thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Tom, as always.
Great talking with you. We'll be back.
Same here. Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, you know, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, you know, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. It's the Mueller report. This is from page 151. According to Nader, Dmitriev was very anxious to connect with the incoming administration and told Nader that he would try other routes to do so besides Nader himself. Nader did not ultimately introduce Dmitriev to anyone associated with the incoming administration during Dmitriev's post-election trip to New York. In early December 2016, Dmitriev again broached the topic of meeting incoming administration officials with Nader in January or February. Dmitriev sent Nader a list of publicly available quotes of Dmitriev speaking positively about Donald Trump in case they were helpful. Subtopic C, Eric Prince and Kirill Dmitriev meet in the Seychelles. Subtopic, George Nader and Eric Prince arrange Seychelles meeting with Dmitriev. Nader traveled to New York in early January 2017 and had lunchtime and dinner meetings with Eric Prince on January 3rd, 2017. Nader and Prince discussed Dmitriev. Nader informed Prince that the Russians were looking to build a link with the incoming Trump administration, redacted by Bill Barr. He told Prince that Dmitriev had been pushing Nader to introduce him to someone from the incoming administration, redacted by Bill Barr. Nader suggested, in light of Prince's relationship with transition team officials, that Prince and Dmitriev meet to discuss issues of mutual concern, redacted by Bill Barr. Prince told Nader that he needed to think further about it and to check with transition team officials. After his dinner with Prince, Nader sent Prince a link to a Wikipedia entry about Dmitriev and sent Dmitriev a message stating that he had just met, quote, with some key people within the family and inner circle, a reference to Prince, and that he had spoken at length and positively about Dmitriev, page 152. Nader told Dmitriev that the people he had met had asked for Dmitriev's bio, and Dmitriev replied that he would update and send it. Nader later received from Dmitriev 2 files concerning Dmitriev. One was a 2-page biography. The other was a list of Dmitriev's positive quotes about Donald Trump. The next morning, Nader forwarded the message and attachments Dmitriev had sent him to Prince. Nader wrote to Prince that these documents were the versions, quote, to be used with some additional details for them, parenthesis, with them referring to members of the incoming administration. Prince opened the attachments at Trump Tower within an hour of receiving them. Prince stated that while he was at Trump Tower that day, he spoke with Kellyanne Conway, Wilbur Ross, Steve Mnuchin, and others while waiting to see Steve Bannon. Cell site location data for Prince's mobile phone indicates that Prince remained at Trump Tower for approximately 3 hours. Prince said that he did not recall whether during those 3 hours he met with Bannon and discussed Dmitriev with him. And the rest of that paragraph, it was blacked out by Bill Barr. Prince booked a ticket to the Seychelles on January 7th, 2017. The following day, Nader wrote to Dmitriev that he had a, quote, pleasant surprise for him, namely that he had arranged for Dmitriev to meet a special guest from the new team, referring to Prince. Nader asked Dmitriev if he would come to the Seychelles for the meeting on January 12th, 2017, and Dmitriev agreed. The following day, Dmitriev sought assurance from Nader that the Seychelles meeting would be worthwhile. Blocked out. Next part is blocked out by Bill Barr. Dmitriev was not enthusiastic about the idea of meeting with Prince, and that Nader assured him that Prince wielded influence with the incoming administration. Page 153. Nader wrote to Dmitriev, "This guy Prince is designated by Steve Bannon is designated to meet you. I know him, and he is very well connected and trusted by the new team. His sister is now a minister of education." According to Nader, Prince had led him to believe that Bannon was aware of Prince's upcoming meeting with Dmitriev, and Prince acknowledged that it was fair for Nader to think that Prince would pass information on to the transition team. Bannon, however, told the Mueller office that Prince did not tell him in advance about his meeting with Dmitriev. Subtitle 2, the Seychelles meeting. Dmitriev arrived with his wife in the Seychelles on January 11, 2017, and checked into the Four Seasons Resort, where Crown Prince Mohammed and Nader were staying. Prince arrived that same day. Prince and Dmitriev met for the first time that afternoon in Nader's villa with Nader present. The initial meeting lasted approximately 30 to 45 minutes. Next paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. Prince described the 8 years of the Obama administration in negative terms and stated that he is looking forward to a new era of cooperation and conflict resolution. According to Prince, he told Dmitriev that Bannon was effective, if not conventional, and that Prince provided policy papers to Bannon. And the entire rest of page 153 was blacked out by Bill Barr. The first part of page 154, the first third, was blocked out by Bill Barr. Except for one sentence. The topic of Russian interference in the 2016 election did not come up. The next sentence was blocked out by Bill Barr. Then Prince added that he would inform Bannon about his meeting with Dmitriev, and that if there was interest in continuing the conversation, Bannon or someone else on the transition team would do so. And then the rest of that paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. Afterwards, Prince returned to his room, where he learned that a Russian aircraft carrier had sailed to Libya, which led him to call Nader and ask him to set up another meeting with Dmitriev. According to Nader, Prince called and said he had checked with his associates back home and needed to convey to Dmitriev that Libya was, quote, off the table. Nader wrote to Dmitriev that Prince had received an urgent message that he needs to convey to you immediately, and arranged for himself, Dmitriev, and Prince to meet at a restaurant on the Four Seasons property. At the second meeting, Prince told Dmitriev that the United States could not accept any Russian involvement in Libya because it would make the situation there much worse. And the rest of that page is blocked out by Bill Barr. Page 155, the first paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. After the brief second meeting concluded, Nader and Dmitriev discussed what had transpired. Dmitriev told Nader that he was disappointed. It's the Mueller report. And it continues there. It's the Mueller report, page 142.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Fascinating hour with Congressman Pocan. Wow, did you hear some of those calls and some of his responses with regard to impeachment and leadership in the House and Senate and all this kind of stuff? Whew, what an amazing hour. Anyhow, hang on just a second. Not sure why my microphone was making those noises, but anyhow, I wanted to get into this larger question here. I've got a piece up on Salon.com. It's over at rawstory.com. It's over at alternate.org. I think it's on commondreams.org right now. Basically pointing out that Donald Trump is inviting authoritarian governments to hack our elections. Joking about it with President Putin, stuff with Saudi Arabia, et cetera, just laying this out. And of course, he wouldn't do that. And I think this might be one of the reasons why he doesn't reach out to democratic governments, small d democratic governments, why he's not, why he's dissing the Europeans, because they're not going to help him by hacking an election. But, and this is why I think Mitch McConnell is blocking any legislation that would harden our election systems, which our own government is suggesting there's over 10,000 voting machines that are vulnerable to hacking. And not all of them are necessarily even connected to the internet, but once the data from them goes into the tabulators, the parts of the voting system, they're very vulnerable to hacking and may well have been hacked in the past. So, Trump is doing this. And it raises, I think, a larger question, and that's the one that I want to pose for the hour, which is America the first developed country to begin moving backwards? When we look at the history of the United States, the story we tell ourselves is that, we were one of the first modern democratic republics. But the fact of the matter is that if we want to call ourselves democratic, in the small d, democratic, meaning, the will of the majority. That was certainly not the case at the founding of this republic. And if we wanted to call ourselves a republic, a form of government that is led by the rule of law in which the people have a say in how things happen, we really weren't even a democratic republic at the founding of our republic. People of color could not vote or participate in the political process. Women could not vote or engage in the political process. Neither people of color nor women were allowed to own property, were allowed to sue, were allowed to participate in commerce. This was the case, by the way, for both of these groups all the way through the 18th century, from 1787 until 1800, the entire 19th century from 1800 to 1900, and frankly, the first 50 years or so of the 20th century. I mean, women got arguably, black men got the vote in the late 1860s. I think it was 1868. The 13th Amendment and the 13th, 14th, 15th were ratified over, as I recall, a period of a couple of years, but during Reconstruction, but it really didn't stick, as it were. I mean, we all know about the failure of Reconstruction. Women didn't get the vote until 1920, with the 19th Amendment. And so we've really only been a democratic republic for, let's say, since 1920. And even at that, we still had separate but equal until 1954. And we still had redlining, institutionally, not in the way that you can point to and say, aha, that company just drew that map, but functionally, structurally, as a result of the way the economy has been put together, to this day. So if you define us, but to get back to my original point, within this larger arc, we started out with only white men voting and having power in the United States. And in many states, it was only white men who owned property. Then we went to, white men more generally, including poor white men. Then we included people of color, and then we included women. And you could say at each step along the way, the United States became more democratic, small d democratic, which is, a good thing. I don't think anybody would disagree with that's a good thing. And we made some really substantial gains in the 1940s, the 1950s, the 1960s, and the 1970s with the empowerment of the middle class, the empowerment of women, the women's rights movement, the gay rights movement, which has become the LGBT movement, right across the board, LGBTQ movement. We step by step, we have been moving forward, and we've been moving forward really rather rapidly over the last, over that period from 1940, basically, or let's say 33, when Franklin Roosevelt became president, until 1980, when Reagan became president, or 81, when he was sworn in. And then we started going backwards. We had a third of America was unionized when Reagan came into office. Now it's 6% in the private economy. We're actually going backwards in terms of the rights of working people. We had media in this country when Reagan came into office that was, broadly, I'm lacking the word. I mean, certainly our corporate media had a lot of problems, and it was very, it was run in a kind of top-down way, but it was at least relatively broadly honest. Now we have openly dishonest media in the form of, Fox so-called news and right-wing hate radio, which literally can be heard in every city, town, and even unincorporated rural area in the United States. The people behind this anti-democracy movement have spent a fortune building out, and they call it conservative. I would call it fascistic, or at least corporatistic, media structure here. For example, Tucker Carlson last night. I'm not sure if this was last night or the night before. I believe it was last night. It was Tuesday night. Tucker Carlson did this segment about Ilhan Omar. Ilhan Omar, now first of all, you got to get the story of this woman. She was born in Somalia, where there was a civil war going on. She and her family fled Somalia in 1991, and they spent 4 years living in a refugee camp in Kenya. They left Kenya and arrived in the United States under a resettlement program. That would have been in '94. This was during the Clinton administration. And she became a citizen. And then she ran for Congress. This Somali refugee ran for Congress because she so loves this country. She so wants to participate in this country. And in fact, she responded. She said, no country, she said, where'd it go? Here it is. She said that, looking for my specific quote here. She said, no lies by Tucker Carlson, essentially, will stamp out my love for this country or my resolve to make our union more perfect. So what did Tucker Carlson say about her? He said that she is living proof that the way we practice immigration has become dangerous to this country. She says that Omar left one of the world's poorest countries to come to America, the world's richest country, and all the bounty that implies, claiming that she has a lot to be grateful for. And then Tucker Carlson, honest to God, said this. Can you imagine a member of the media who still has a job today, looks into the camera and says to America, this black woman who came to the United States as a refugee and who loves this country and has been working to improve this country and worked her way all the way up to Congress. He says, he said, but she isn't grateful, not at all. After everything America has done for Omar and her family, she hates this country more than ever. Now, that's the kind of language that led to the Rwandan genocide, where they were calling one of the two tribes, I don't recall if it was Hutu, the Tutsis or the Hutus, or Hutsis, yeah, whatever it is. Which one was the minority group? But they only were about 15% of the population, but the majority group was literally on talk radio saying, these people hate this country, they're cockroaches, go out and kill them. And they did. I mean, this is about as close to asking somebody to assassinate a sitting member of Congress as I've ever heard. He goes on to say, so be grateful for Ilhan Omar, as annoying as she is. She's a living fire alarm, a warning to the rest of us that we better change our immigration system immediately or else. So, is the United States the first country to actually see democracy go backwards? Vladimir Putin recently said, President Putin of Russia recently said that liberal democracy is now obsolete. And, from the point of view of people like Tucker Carlson, I think this is their perspective. And not just in the United States. The liberal democracy has been under attack basically since the beginning of the Reagan administration. So the question, is America the first country, the first developed country, to actually move backwards? I mean, conservatives led the destruction of the U.S. labor market. Reagan and Clinton, and it wasn't just Clinton. I mean, it was just this entire era from the 80s until just recently kicked off an era of massive deregulation. Well, Trump is still doing it. Massive deregulation led directly to the crash of 2008. Reagan, Bush, and Trump's massive tax cuts have thrown America massively into debt and wildly exacerbated the divide between rich and poor. Go back to Reagan's tax cuts. Those three tax cuts and those three Republican presidents account for virtually all of the national debt. The rest of it can be accounted for by George W. Bush's illegal wars. Now, we have moved toward a more economically equal society in some ways, but actually not since the 1980s. We're actually going backwards. And then we've got Trump's demagoguery over his wall and putting kids in cages, inflaming the white racists like Tucker Carlson, and threatening to undo us, this last century of forward progress, Brown v. Board and everything else. So the question, was America the first country where liberal democracy began to backslide? How rapidly is this accelerating across the world? We're seeing right-wing parties now rising to power in those countries that have experienced neoliberal attacks, like Greece and Spain and others. Is this the end of liberal democracy, for that matter? And I'm not talking about liberal like I'm a liberal. I'm talking about liberal democracy as in the idea of of course it was just an idea at the time, but the idea of the founders when this country was first put together, the improvements after the Civil War, the improvements after, with the Great Society and Lyndon Johnson. How are we the first to go backwards, and how do we stop that slide?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Particularly when you've got these hateful billionaires like Rupert Murdoch owning Fox News and pushing this kind of stuff through people like Tucker Carlson. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's see here. Estelle in Astoria, Oregon. Hey, Estelle, what's on your mind today?
Oh, I'm really afraid, Tom. My mom has been a longtime Democrat all her life, and now my dad is in a home because he has dementia, so she is alone, sitting, watching TV, and now she's on YouTube watching all these Republican TV, and now she's totally turned the other way. She is to the point where she is scared for her grandchildren. She wants, she's afraid she wants the Muslims out of our country. She's afraid that she's scared. And anything I say or try to say for Democrats is just like, it's rampage. I mean, it's just where I'm really, really scared.
Do you have any stewardship over her?
No, not yet. My dad, we're just trying to get my dad taken care of because he was put in, and I recommend to anybody out there, please, if you know somebody that is older or whatever, get what do you call it over them? Get power of attorney because it's a nightmare.
Well, what I was wondering, Louise and I have a TV service, coming into our house that we watch television on, and we specifically asked them not to include Fox News in our package. So you can't watch Fox News in my home right now. I mean, occasionally I check in on the internet to see what's going on, but Jen Seiko, I think is her name, did this movie. Senko, thank you, Sean. Did this movie called The Brainwashing of My Father, or my dad, one or the other. And I think you can watch it on Netflix right now. It's floating around out there. Okay. And basically, her father went through the exact same thing you're describing with your mother. And what they did was they contacted, as I recall, they contacted the cable company and said, take Fox off our cable. And then when Dad started complaining about he couldn't find Fox, they were like, well, it's broken. The cable box is broken. It just doesn't carry all the channels it used to. But give it a few weeks and maybe it'll get better. And so he started watching CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CB, real news, real media, and it broke the spell.
Hers is YouTube. She gets on YouTube and through her TV, and I'm trying to get her to go to a different TV selection, so hopefully they won't have YouTube and then she'll say, oh, I'm not going to do this anymore. And then 3 days later, she'll bring up a subject that we thought was done, and she'll start fighting it again. And it's like, this is not my mother.
Yeah, it's a real tragedy. Rupert Murdoch, first in Australia, as Kevin Rudd, the former Prime Minister, he said Rupert Murdoch is the cancer at the heart of Australian democracy. First in Australia, then he moved to the UK, and he did it to the UK, which brought us Maggie Thatcher and everything else. And then he came here to the United States and has poisoned our airwaves and poisoned our political dialogue. And the stuff that he's putting out, things like what Tucker Carlson said last night, this is pure racist poison.
And if you call them that, if you say that's what they are, oh my gosh, no way, they're not that. My mom will say, well, I'm a nationalist. And then we give her the definition of a nationalist. And she's like, oh, no, I'm patriotic.
Right.
But what they say is not what they're, you know what I mean?
But they've constructed this very elaborate, essentially media universe that is self-reinforcing and that seems so credible. They use very, very good production values, and they use all this, all-American iconography, with flags and all this kind of stuff.
Oh, definitely.
It's poisonous still, and I don't know how to deal with it with elderly people who are very vulnerable to this kind of stuff, other than taking it out of their environment. Maybe it's time for her TV to break. Estelle, thank you for the call. Good luck. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thom Hartmann here with you, and just had a heartbreaking call from a woman whose her father went into a retirement facility or rest home because he has dementia. Mom is home alone watching Fox News and has turned into a screaming, essentially racist, kind of a Tucker Carlson follower, essentially. And, what can you do about it? And I don't have an easy answer or solution, other than watching Jen Senko's movie, The Brainwashing of My Dad. They basically had to, as I recall, it's been a couple of years since I watched the movie, but my recollection is that they called their cable company and said, turn off Fox News, and then told Dad, I think the box is broken, and, you can't have Fox, we'll get this fixed the next month or so. And Dad started actually paying attention to real media and discovering that, Fox was lying to him. And they got Dad back. And I'm not talking about politically. Dad had become an emotional wreck. I mean, Fox, one of the techniques that they use to get people, to stoke outrage, right-wing outrage and hate for racial minorities in particular, is fear. They just build all kinds of fear in people. Roger in Orlando, Florida. Roger, your thoughts on all this?
I want to tie in something that you said about the going backwards.
Yeah.
And this has to do with something the late Chalmers Johnson said. I don't know if you read any of his books, but he said one time the British Empire at one point in their empire, they were an empire and a democracy. And he said we can't be both. So they chose to stay a democracy, and they saved their democracy.
Right.
And I wonder if we're such an empire that we're losing our democracy, too, in that sense. I mean, I sometimes think of the Thelma and Louise movie where hopefully we're not going backwards into the cliff, but if we don't change things by next November, a year and a half from now, who knows? But and one last thing, look out for Matt Taibbi's new book, Hate Incorporated.
Right.
And thanks for what you do. Carry on.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Yeah, I think that I hope we're not in the Thelma and Louise movie, but it really strikes me that this extraordinary takeover of our media by right-wing billionaires, of television as well as radio and print, the takeover of our courts by right-wing billionaires through the Federalist Society, the takeover of our government by and large, all these think tanks, even the rewriting of Wikipedia. I mean, it's amazing how Wikipedia has been rewritten in so many ways. Wherever there's a topic that's a juicy right-wing topic, just the whole thing is just breathtaking. And I think we just have to be speaking truth and pushing back as hard as we can.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And another big piece of that, of course, is to be sure that we get progressives elected in 2020. We've got a lot of work to do here. It's the Mueller report. This is from page 151. According to Nader, Dmitriev was very anxious to connect with the incoming administration and told Nader that he would try other routes to do so besides Nader himself. Nader did not ultimately introduce Dmitriev to anyone associated with the incoming administration during Dmitriev's post-election trip to New York. In early December 2016, Dmitriev again broached the topic of meeting incoming administration officials with Nader in January or February. Dmitriev sent Nader a list of publicly available quotes of Dmitriev speaking positively about Donald Trump in case they were helpful. Subtopic C, Eric Prince and Kirill Dmitriev meet in the Seychelles. Subtopic, George Nader and Eric Prince arrange Seychelles meeting with Dmitriev. Nader traveled to New York in early January 2017 and had lunchtime and dinner meetings with Eric Prince on January 3rd, 2017. Nader and Prince discussed Dmitriev. Nader informed Prince that the Russians were looking to build a link with the incoming Trump administration, redacted by Bill Barr. He told Prince that Dmitriev had been pushing Nader to introduce him to someone from the incoming administration, redacted by Bill Barr. Nader suggested, in light of Prince's relationship with transition team officials, that Prince and Dmitriev meet to discuss issues of mutual concern, redacted by Bill Barr. Prince told Nader that he needed to think further about it and to check with transition team officials. After his dinner with Prince, Nader sent Prince a link to a Wikipedia entry about Dmitriev and sent Dmitriev a message stating that he had just met, quote, with some key people within the family and inner circle, a reference to Prince, and that he had spoken at length and positively about Dmitriev, page 152. Nader told Dmitriev that the people he had met had asked for Dmitriev's bio, and Dmitriev replied that he would update and send it. Nader later received from Dmitriev 2 files concerning Dmitriev. One was a 2-page biography. The other was a list of Dmitriev's positive quotes about Donald Trump. The next morning, Nader forwarded the message and attachments Dmitriev had sent him to Prince. Nader wrote to Prince that these documents were the versions, quote, to be used with some additional details for them, parenthesis, with them referring to members of the incoming administration. Prince opened the attachments at Trump Tower within an hour of receiving them. Prince stated that while he was at Trump Tower that day, he spoke with Kellyanne Conway, Wilbur Ross, Steve Mnuchin, and others while waiting to see Steve Bannon. Cell site location data for Prince's mobile phone indicates that Prince remained at Trump Tower for approximately 3 hours. Prince said that he did not recall whether during those 3 hours he met with Bannon and discussed Dmitriev with him. And the rest of that paragraph, it was blacked out by Bill Barr. Prince booked a ticket to the Seychelles on January 7th, 2017. The following day, Nader wrote to Dmitriev that he had a, quote, pleasant surprise for him, namely that he had arranged for Dmitriev to meet a special guest from the new team, referring to Prince. Nader asked Dmitriev if he would come to the Seychelles for the meeting on January 12th, 2017, and Dmitriev agreed. The following day, Dmitriev sought assurance from Nader that the Seychelles meeting would be worthwhile. Blocked out. Next part is blocked out by Bill Barr. Dmitriev was not enthusiastic about the idea of meeting with with Prince, and that Nader assured him that Prince wielded influence with the incoming administration. Page 153. Nader wrote to Dmitriev, "This guy Prince is designated by Steve Bannon is designated to meet you. I know him, and he is very well connected and trusted by the new team. His sister is now a minister of education." According to Nader, Prince had led him to believe that Bannon was aware of Prince's upcoming meeting with Dmitriev, and Prince acknowledged that it was fair for Nader to think that Prince would pass information on to the transition team. Bannon, however, told the Mueller office that Prince did not tell him in advance about his meeting with Dmitriev. Subtitle 2, the Seychelles meeting. Dmitriev arrived with his wife in the Seychelles on January 11, 2017, and checked into the Four Seasons Resort, where Crown Prince Mohammed and Nader were staying. Prince arrived that same day. Prince and Dmitriev met for the first time that afternoon in Nader's villa with Nader present. The initial meeting lasted approximately 30 to 45 minutes. Next paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. Prince described the 8 years of the Obama administration in negative terms and stated that he is looking forward to a new era of cooperation and conflict resolution. According to Prince, he told Dmitriev that Bannon was effective, if not conventional, and that Prince provided policy papers to Bannon. And the entire rest of page 153 was blacked out by Bill Barr. The first part of page 154, the first third, was blocked out by Bill Barr, except for one sentence. The topic of Russian interference in the 2016 election did not come up. The next sentence was blocked out by Bill Barr. Then Prince added that he would inform Bannon about his meeting with Dmitriev, and that if there was interest in continuing the conversation, Bannon or someone else on the transition team would do so. And then the rest of that paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. Afterwards, Prince returned to his room, where he learned that a Russian aircraft carrier had sailed to Libya, which led him to call Nader and ask him to set up another meeting with Dmitriev. According to Nader, Prince called and said he had checked with his associates back home and needed to convey to Dmitriev that Libya was, quote, off the table. Nader wrote to Dmitriev that Prince had received an urgent message that he needs to convey to you immediately, and arranged for himself, Dmitriev, and Prince to meet at a restaurant on the Four Seasons property. At the second meeting, Prince told Dmitriev that the United States could not accept any Russian involvement in Libya because it would make the situation there much worse. And the rest of that page is blocked out by Bill Barr. Page 155, the first paragraph, blocked out by Bill Barr. After the brief second meeting concluded, Nader and Dmitriev discussed what had transpired. Dmitriev told Nader that he was disappointed. It's the Mueller report.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just a couple of things in the news, then I'll finish picking up your phone calls here. The New York Times reporting that back in 1992, a Florida-based businessman, George Harani, who ran a company called American Dream Enterprises, arranged for 28 girls to come to a private party at Mar-a-Lago. It was a calendar girl competition. And it turns out that, he says, at the very first party, I said, who's coming tonight? I have 28 girls coming. And the guy, he says, it was him and Epstein. I said, Donald, this is supposed to be a party with VIPs. You're telling me it's just you and Epstein? Yeah, that was it. Meanwhile, migrant kids who have been detained are describing sexual attacks, verbal abuse, retaliation by border agents. This is horrific, to say the very least. Kellyanne Conway tries to take down Ayanna Pressley, this absolutely brilliant new congresswoman from the Chicago area, from Northern Illinois. She replies to Kellyanne, "Oh, hi, distraction, Becky. Remember that time your boss tore babies from their mother's arms and threw them in cages? Yeah, take a seat and keep my name out of your lying mouth." It is so cool to see members of Congress talking back in ways that are just like Ilhan Omar. Her response to Tucker Carlson was to call him a racist fool, right? And God bless her for it. Meanwhile, a federal appeals court has said that the lawsuits by the attorney generals for Maryland and the District of Columbia against Donald Trump for the emoluments constitutional violations, that this panel, the Fourth Circuit, a three-judge panel, dismissed the case, saying that the attorneys general didn't have standing. This is probably going to get appealed to the full panel, and then no matter how it goes, it'll probably end up before the Supreme Court. And Amy McGrath, who is running for Congress, raised $2.5 million in her first 24 hours. She's running for the Senate against Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. And apparently people are very excited about that. So just some updates on what's going on. Jeffrey Epstein, that case, by the way, Alex Acosta is going to hold a press conference at some point today to talk about this. We'll see how he tries to weasel out of this one, or if he's just going to announce his retirement. We'll find out. Corky in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Corky, what's on your mind today?
Hello there. I want to thank you very much for all your work. I just have a quick question. Sorry for the slight change of topic. The Ways and Means Committee, are they going to ask for New York State taxes after Andrew Cuomo signed the bill?
Good question. I think that everything I'm reading is suggesting that they're going to continue going down the road that they're going down, which is, to get the actual returns from the actual IRS and perhaps in the process hold Mnuchin and the IRS commissioner, who, by the way, made $1 million last year from a Trump-branded property that he owns, the IRS commissioner to, hold them accountable. I think, frankly, that both of these guys should be in jail. But, New York State has made this possible, and we'll see. And by the way, it's not just Ways and Means. Corky, any one of the congressional committees, if my understanding of what I've read in the media is correct, any of these committees could ask New York State for the Donald Trump's tax returns and get them. So we'll see what happens. I hope so. I really hope so. Brian in Schaumburg, Illinois. Hey, Brian, what's on your mind today?
Hi. Going back to initially you were discussing economic distress within our economy and American citizens, and I just wanted to. I have a slight critique. Whenever you talk about economics, you rarely mention the effects of World War II and how that affected the world economy, and how that when the war ended, the United States was the only industrial economy standing, basically. So we were the only provider of goods to the world for about, 20, 30 years?
Not really. If you go back and look at the statistics, and I'm sorry I don't have them at the tip of my finger here, but you'll find them in my book Screwed, I'm pretty sure. After World War II, we did not so much export goods as we exported money. The Marshall Plan was not, here's some money that you can use to buy American products. Instead, it was, here's money that you can use to build your own factories, to make your own products, and to rebuild your own country. And it didn't take that long for much of Europe to get back up to speed. And if you look at U.S. exports, they went up after World War II. And as a percentage of GDP, they probably went from, I frankly don't remember the numbers. My recollection is that our exports as part of our GDP after World War II, prior to World War II, were in the low single digits, and after World War II, were in the high single digits. But which certainly helped our economy, but wasn't the thing that drove our economy, and had nothing to do with driving our the wealth of our middle class. The wealth of our exports have continued to increase, after Reagan's tax cuts, but the middle class started to decrease. Why? Because Reagan destroyed unionization, and because that then had this massive effect on wages. And so and then you get into the free trade deals. That was a decade later.
Yeah, I'd also like to add that was my main topic was. Free trade's really a misnomer. They're managed trade agreements.
Of course,
it's not really free.
Yeah, it's so-called free trade. It's not even close to free trade.
They agreed to do that, but it's managed.
Right, and that's why NAFTA was 2,000 pages, as Ross Perot pointed out.
Right, and he was right. The giant sucking sound of jobs leaving the United States. He was absolutely right. And I have never been a fan of Bill Clinton. I'm a member of organized labor. I know what he's done. I remember when we elected him and how I was very dissatisfied with him. And I remember him quoted as saying that, there was no protections for workers in these agreements. And he said, we'll do that later. But later never happened. It still hasn't happened.
Yeah.
It's always money first, people second. And until we get agreements on standards, what are we going to put up with from other nations like China? Are we going to let them use slave labor?
They already are. And other countries are using functional slave labor. Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, as you know, I'm no fan of Bill Clinton's neoliberalism essentially either. But the NAFTA agreement was not written by Bill Clinton. The NAFTA agreement was written by George Herbert Walker Bush and the Reagan administration. This was started in the tail end of the Reagan administration and was completed during the first Bush administration. Yes, Clinton and Bush both agreed with that NAFTA agreement, and that was the '92 election. That's why Ross Perot came in as the spoiler, saying he disagreed with it. But and what's really interesting is that Bill Clinton was ahead in all the polls before and after Ross Perot came in and ultimately became president. The Bush people have said for years that Ross Perot hurt him, but actually the number of voters who were taken out by Ross Perot on the Democratic side versus the Republican side was nearly identical, which tells you, it should tell all of us, that trade is an entirely bipartisan issue or a nonpartisan issue. Americans want their economy back, basically. Gene in Andover, Minnesota. Hey, Gene, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Just wanted to acknowledge the genius of the Republican Party in their ability to leverage the dark side of human nature.
Well, there's no genius to it. They're following Mussolini's playbook, and he wasn't original. He was following Machiavelli's playbook.
Sure.
I mean, this goes back 500 years at the least.
Off the rails now. Sorry.
No, I said this goes back 500 years at least, and probably if you go back and read the Epic of Gilgamesh from 7,000 years ago in Samaria, you'll find the earliest hints of this. But you were going to make a point, Gene?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's kind of gone off the rails now with Trump. It's kind of, like they've created a monster.
Well, this is the problem that we've seen in my lifetime with conservatism. You know, Barry Goldwater conservatism then morphed into Ronald Reagan conservatism. Ronald Reagan conservatism basically became corporatism and morphed into, in my opinion, fascism. You know, in the classic definition, the merger of corporate and state interests, and now it's the merger of billionaire and state interests. And then the media using, as you point out, that kind of dark side, that the fear, the amygdala, the cortisol response, and they're masters at it. Fox News has turned this into an art form, as has right wing hate radio. Excellent points, Gene. Thank you very much for the call. Gerald in Clovis, California. Hey, Gerald, what's up?
Yeah, just a second while I take you off speaker. What I don't understand is why don't people start suing when the radio talk show hosts libel and slander them, as well as the politicians?
Public officials, Tucker Carlson last night libeled or slandered, or whatever word you want to use, Representative Ilhan Omar. As a member of Congress, she has no protections against that. Public officials, people in the public eye, I have no protections against that. Things can be said about me that are openly slanderous, and there's very little I can do about it because I'm a public figure. So when they lie, so if you're a public official, they can lie and they can get away with it. That's correct. That's correct. As we saw, all the lies that were told about Hillary Clinton, for example, they're just blatant lies. And the Republicans continue to repeat these lies. There is no response to that other than trying to get the truth out. And when much of the media is controlled by right-wing billionaires, it becomes a hell of a problem. Gerald, thank you for the call. Pete in Thailand. Oh, hey, Pete, hang on just a second. I just got a 10-second notice here, so I don't want to hit the break with you on the phone. That would not be nice. But we will be checking in here in just a few minutes with Talk Media News to find out what's going on in the world today. So stick around. Bob Ney will be with us. Oh, Bob's a great guy. If you haven't read his book, Sideswiped, it's really worth checking out. It's out of print, but you can easily find used copies around. And hopefully one of these days they'll bring it back into print, because it's such a brilliant analysis of what Congress was like in the late 90s and the early 2000s. It's just breathtaking, what he went through and what the stories that he had to tell. So we'll be checking in with him in about 4 minutes.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be right back with Talk Media News. Stick around. And welcome back. Pete in Tyler, Texas. Let's try it again. Hey, Pete, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Yeah, Tom, you had a caller a few minutes ago was talking about how World War II inspired our economy. My memory is that the first Volkswagen I ever saw came across the water in 1949. That was only 4 years after the war finished.
Well, and I would add, the main thing that jump-started our economy was World War II, but it had nothing to do with our ability to export. It had to do with the fact that for about 5 or 6 years, how long was World War II? It was 4 or 5 years? Whatever that period of time was. During that period of time, there was enormous demand that built up in the United States. You could not buy a car because the car factories weren't making them. You couldn't buy nylon stockings because they were making parachutes out of that nylon. You couldn't buy, there were all kinds of foodstuffs that were being rationed. We had a period of 4 or 5 years here in the United States where you just couldn't buy stuff. And as a consequence of that, after the war was over, Americans went on a spending spree. And so, you could say World War II, it was a massive government stimulus and it helped rebuild the American economy. But it wasn't because we were the last industrial power standing. You're right, Gordon. Pete. Germany rebuilt their, and not just Germany. Much of the rest of Europe was nowhere near as badly damaged as was Germany. So after World War II, in a significant way. Thanks a lot for the call. It's great to hear from you. Tim in Beaverton, Oregon. Hey, Tim, what's up?
Yeah, an interesting little thing you're talking about Tucker Carlson. A lot of people, if you look at his history, CNN and MSNBC told him to take a hike. So basically, when he got on the Fox News, it's a personal vendetta. I don't even know whether he even believes that stuff, but it sells. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's basically what it's all about. And I was going to make a comment about the Marshall Plan because I read the book about it. What a remarkable guy. Yeah. What you have to look at, and he didn't want any credit for it. If you look at his history. My dad was a disabled World War II vet, the middle class started after World War II. A lot of people don't understand that. GI Bill, he was able to go back to school. He got
my dad too.
From the Army, got a good job, bought a home with $200 down. You see what I mean?
Yep.
That's what started the greatness in this country. And now we have a situation where we've got 18 to 30-year-olds who really don't care about the political system. I was in sales and marketing for 35 years. I did some teaching. I have friends who are teachers, and they're just aghast at these high school and college kids who have no perspective of history anymore. And if you don't have that, you're going to make the same mistakes we did years ago.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
To paraphrase George
voting.
Santayana.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, finish your thought.
Yeah, they aren't voting is what's happening. If you can get them out to vote, you can forget about these homophobic, racist, misogynistic, right-wing Second Amendment lunatics, which put that lunatic into office. Because if you outnumber them, in theory, unless they do more election fraud and voter fraud, but you have to get the young people out.
I think there's an entire generation that's waking up, Tim. I'm hearing from boomers and millennials. Basically, the people in the middle, the people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, they're working so hard that they have a hard time paying attention to politics. But people under 30, under 30, and people over 50, they're paying very careful attention. The people over 50 in particular, because they know that their retirement's on the line. The Republicans want to take down Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, and the people under 30 because they've been wiped out by debt. They can't get decent jobs. All these things. So. Yeah, I'm with you. Tim, thank you very much for the call. We do need to be waking up everybody in sight. We'll be back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Bob Ney with Talk Media News is going to check in with us and let us know what's the latest in the world. So stick around. Ten minutes before the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, Alan Ratner's new book. And on the line with us is the author of Sideswiped, former Ohio Congressman Bob Ney. Congressman, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Tom, so much.
So what's at the top of the news in your mind?
Well, I didn't have this, but I listened to the last caller, so I just wanted to throw this out there. And this was from an article, actually, probably about, I think it was 2 months ago. Mm-hmm. But, you were talking about the young people voting, right?
Right.
Well, young people actually rocked the vote in 2018. Voter turnout spiked to a 100-year high.
Really?
A lot of people aren't aware of this, yes.
Among people of what age or all ages?
Well, in last year's midterm congressional elections, I'm talking about, and this is coming, by the way, from the Census Bureau. This is not a poll or anything. It jumped across nearly all the groups, but the shift was extremely notable, particularly amongst young adults who typically stay home in non-presidential years.
Wow. So that's good news.
The United States Elections Project gave us that information. I barely saw a story on it, but I held on to that story because I've always, been in office for years, looked at the young vote and how you get them out, as, Barack Obama, of course, did. But I just wanted to note, 100-year high and across all spectrums, but notably, particularly young people.
Wow. Fascinating. So what's in the news?
Well, in the news is, I'll go to a poll now. There's a new poll out, and I think this is fascinating. Polls are polls, but, we look at them anyway. President Trump trails former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Bernie Sanders in the 2020 mock-up, but the incumbent, Republican president has taken the lead, and now this is how the story runs, I love this, has taken the lead against other top-tier Democrats seeking the presidency, according to an Emerson poll. Now, so he's taken the lead. Here's what the lead is, though. Mayor Pete Buttigieg, Senator Elizabeth Warren, and Kamala Harris, he's leading them by 51 to 49. So when you really start to look at, he's leading all, he's leading against all of them except for Bernie Sanders, of course, and Joe Biden. Joe Biden. But when you really look at it, on the other candidates, who I'm not, putting them down, but they are, quote, the complete top of the food chain in the sense when you look at, the first two, Biden and Sanders. Well, actually, these people who are, quote, according to the article, lower level, are really doing pretty good. 51-49 is not bad.
Particularly given that this far out, a lot of those people don't even have name recognition with much of the electorate.
Correct. Yeah, that's correct. So I just thought I would, throw that out.
In fact,
there.
I think with these kind of polls, Bob, don't you think this far out that they're not measuring popularity as much as they're measuring name recognition?
Oh, correct. That's right. Okay. But to me, if I was on the Trump campaign and I saw though that it was 51-49 with for example, Mayor Pete Buttigieg or Kamala Harris, if I saw that, I would be thinking, okay, that's it shouldn't be in that direction.
Right. This is really bad news. Yeah.
Name ID wise, it shouldn't. Yeah. So it's interesting. This one I can't figure out. Good legal minds are going to figure it out, but Trump won an appeals court win on the emoluments case, right. And that would be the Fourth Circuit.
Apparently, that win was based on standing. What they said was those two AGs don't have standing to enforce the Constitution, essentially. And I suppose you could make the argument that only the Supreme Court has standing to enforce the Constitution. I mean, going back to Marbury versus Madison, but this is going to be appealed.
Well, yes, and you just made the point that
or maybe a member of Congress would have standing.
I would think
as a constitutional officer.
So they put this as a big win, and the president said, of course, in fake news and everything else. And I gave his quote. In fact, was that he doesn't take a salary, which has nothing to do with the emoluments clause of not making money off of the position of president.
Right.
So. Now I'm going to be, and the news media is going to be watching Tom to see who has standing, because you said it exactly, and it was not a win for him based on the fact of the emoluments clause, but it was a win based on the fact that Maryland and the District of Columbia do not have standing. So I think somebody with a good legal mind is going to figure out who does have standing and how do you?
Well, it would have to be one of the other two branches of government, and which I think would include every senator and every member of the House of Representatives.
Yes,
certainly should have standing as constitutional officers, defined in the Constitution, whereas state attorney generals are not even mentioned in the Constitution.
Correct. And eventually this has to go up to the Supreme Court. I would assume it probably just has to, because it's a huge issue and it's a unique precedent with the president being in office and still continuing to run businesses and having staff in office who are also in the business, which is his children and son-in-law.
Right.
So it's got to go up there.
Yep.
And then the other story we had is about I'm sure you've been talking about this, the census team. And now these lawyers in the Justice Department literally have to be afraid, because the federal judge has said, okay, I want you to attest and be sworn in when you're talking and tell me why, in fact, you are to be off this case. And I think that's very fascinating with the census, of course, when the president tweeted out.
So he's going back to the original lawyers? I know that two of the people have left in the employ of the DOJ, but the rest of them are still there. He's going back to the original lawyers and saying, I want you to testify to me about why you were removed from the case?
That's what he wants to do.
That's huge.
It is. Jesse Furman wrote, here's what he wrote in the court order, that the Justice Department's attorney's switch plan was patently deficient. And so what he is saying is, it doesn't prevent, basically, the Trump administration from switching legal teams, but this judge said any new motions to withdraw must be supported by a signed and sworn affidavit from each counsel seeking to withdraw for their satisfactory reasons for doing so.
Wow.
So this is pretty big, because they're going to have to attest to why they did this. Now, the question, of course, could be this, are they creating a frivolous situation? If they are, they could be in legal jeopardy with their license. But on top of it, it could be investigated who then did this frivolous. Did this come from the Justice Department itself, creating a frivolous situation?
Remarkable stuff. Bob Ney.
Yes.
Bob, thanks so much for dropping by today.
Thank you, Tom.
Great talking with you. We'll be back right after this. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Evan Greer is going to drop by. David Swanson actually is going to be up next, though. Stick around. We're going to be talking about guns.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
It's the Mueller report. This is from page 151. According to Nader, Dmitriev was very anxious to connect with the incoming administration and told Nader that he would try other routes to do so besides Nader himself. Nader did not ultimately introduce Dmitriev to anyone associated with the incoming administration during Dmitriev's post-election trip to New York. In early December 2016, Dmitriev again broached the topic of meeting incoming administration officials with Nader in January or February. Dmitriev sent Nader a list of publicly available quotes of Dmitriev speaking positively about Donald Trump in case they were helpful. Subtopic C, Eric Prince and Kirill Dmitriev meet in the Seychelles. Subtopic, George Nader and Eric Prince arrange Seychelles meeting with Dmitriev. Nader traveled to New York in early January 2017 and had lunchtime and dinner meetings with Eric Prince on January 3, 2017. Nader and Prince discussed Dmitriev. Nader informed Prince that the Russians were looking to build a link with the incoming Trump administration, redacted by Bill Barr. He told Prince that Dmitriev had been pushing Nader to introduce him to someone from the incoming administration, redacted by Bill Barr. Nader suggested, in light of Prince's relationship with transition team officials, that Prince and Dmitriev meet to discuss issues of mutual concern, redacted by Bill Barr. Prince told Nader that he needed to think further about it and to check with transition team officials. After his dinner with Prince, Nader sent Prince a link to a Wikipedia entry about Dmitriev and sent Dmitriev a message stating that he had just met, quote, with some key people within the family and inner circle, a reference to Prince, and that he had spoken at length and positively about Dmitriev, page 152. Nader told Dmitriev that the people he had met had asked for Dmitriev's bio, and Dmitriev replied that he would update and send it. Nader later received from Dmitriev 2 files concerning Dmitriev. One was a 2-page biography. The other was a list of Dmitriev's positive quotes about Donald Trump. The next morning, Nader forwarded the message and attachments Dmitriev had sent him to Prince. Nader wrote to Prince that these documents were the versions, quote, to be used with some additional details for them, parenthesis, with them referring to members of the incoming administration. Prince opened the attachments at Trump Tower within an hour of receiving them. Prince stated that while he was at Trump Tower that day, he spoke with Kellyanne Conway, Wilbur Ross, Steve Mnuchin, and others while waiting to see Steve Bannon. Cell site location data for Prince's mobile phone indicates that Prince remained at Trump Tower for approximately 3 hours. Prince said that he did not recall whether during those 3 hours he met with Bannon and discussed Dmitriev with him. And the rest of that paragraph, it was blacked out by Bill Barr. Prince booked a ticket to the Seychelles on January 7, 2017. The following day, Nader wrote to Dmitriev that he had a, quote, pleasant surprise for him, namely that he had arranged for Dmitriev to meet a special guest from the new team, referring to Prince. Nader asked Dmitriev if he would come to the Seychelles for the meeting on January 12, 2017, and Dmitriev agreed. The following day, Dmitriev sought assurance from Nader that the Seychelles meeting would be worthwhile. Blocked out. Next part is blocked out by Bill Barr. Dmitriev was not enthusiastic about the idea of meeting with Prince, and that Nader assured him that Prince wielded influence with the incoming administration. Page 153. Nader wrote to Dmitriev, "This guy Prince is designated by Steve Bannon is designated to meet you. I know him, and he is very well connected and trusted by the new team. His sister is now a minister of education." According to Nader, Prince had led him to believe that Bannon was aware of Prince's upcoming meeting with Dmitriev, and Prince acknowledged that it was fair for Nader to think that Prince would pass information on to the transition team. Bannon, however, told the Mueller office that Prince did not tell him in advance about his meeting with Dmitriev. Subtitle 2, the Seychelles meeting. Dmitriev arrived with his wife in the Seychelles on January 11, 2017, and checked into the Four Seasons Resort, where Crown Prince Mohammed and Nader were staying. Prince arrived that same day. Prince and Dmitriev met for the first time that afternoon in Nader's villa with Nader present. The initial meeting lasted approximately 30 to 45 minutes. Next paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. Prince described the 8 years of the Obama administration in negative terms and stated that he was looking forward to a new era of cooperation and conflict resolution. According to Prince, he told Dmitriev that Bannon was effective, if not conventional, and that Prince provided policy papers to Bannon. And the entire rest of page 153 was blacked out by Bill Barr. The first part of page 154, the first third, was blocked out by Bill Barr, except for one sentence. The topic of Russian interference in the 2016 election did not come up. The next sentence was blocked out by Bill Barr. Then Prince added that he would inform Bannon about his meeting with Dmitriev, and that if there was interest in continuing the conversation, Bannon or someone else on the transition team would do so. And then the rest of that paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. Afterwards, Prince returned to his room, where he learned that a Russian aircraft carrier had sailed to Libya, which led him to call Nader and ask him to set up another meeting with Dmitriev. According to Nader, Prince called and said he had checked with his associates back home and needed to convey to Dmitriev that Libya was, quote, off the table. Nader wrote to Dmitriev that Prince had received an urgent message that he needs to convey to you immediately, and arranged for himself, Dmitriev, and Prince to meet at a restaurant on the Four Seasons property. At the second meeting, Prince told Dmitriev that the United States could not accept any Russian involvement in Libya because it would make the situation there much worse. And the rest of that page is blocked out by Bill Barr. Page 155, the first paragraph, blocked out by Bill Barr. After the brief second meeting concluded, Nader and Dmitriev discussed what had just transpired. Dmitriev told Nader that he was disappointed. It's the Mueller report. You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is David Swanson, the journalist, activist, campaign director over at rootsaction.org, the author of what I think is one of the most thought-provoking, provocative, and important books that I've read in the last 20 years, War is a Lie. It's really an extraordinary piece of work. David, welcome back to the program.
Hi, Tom, and thanks for liking War is a Lie so much.
Oh, it's just, well, as you know, I've been singing the praises of this book for what? It's been 8-10 years since you wrote it, something like that. It's still remarkable. We have a link to your petition over at Roots Action on our Facebook page. And you started a petition having to do with guns that specifically references my book. So I guess you could say that this is kind of self-serving. I wasn't thinking of it that way until just now, realizing how this might sound. But I wrote this book, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment, because I'm horrified by the fact that 40,000 people died of gun violence last year, and thought that we needed to talk about not only the situation and how we got here, but also what we can do. And you put forward a very specific petition. Tell us about that.
Well, I enjoyed your book, as you know, and thought that your proposals were both substantive and significant and would have a big impact, but also so incredibly reasonable and rational and moderate that nobody could possibly object. Whereas my inclination since the moment I ever heard about people being killed with guns was ban all the damn things. Your proposals, which we put into this petition to the governor of Virginia, who had called a special session of the General Assembly in the wake of yet another mass shooting that happened to be in Virginia, we put in there your ideas to treat guns like cars. That is, have a title and registration, have a license that requires passing tests, have liability insurance required, and on top of that, treat semi-automatic weapons the same as automatic weapons in terms of bans and regulations. And we got over 5,000 people to sign it. People are still signing it. We still want more people to sign it at diy.rootsaction.org. and we sent it to the governor of Virginia, who had drafted his own proposals, which I don't know what you think of them. I thought they were pretty weak, although I liked one of them in particular. I mean,
what was the one you liked?
Well, the one I especially like was the one that says localities can do better than this crap job that we're doing at the state level. Right. I like that. I live here in Charlottesville, where they, refused to ban guns at a fascist rally 2 summers ago, right. and then on the 1-year anniversary last summer, they got their act together and they banned every weapon under the sun except guns. It's just absurd. You couldn't bring a slingshot or a plastic fork or a camera, but you could bring a gun, an automatic. And so I like that. I like that idea. And the others were sort of the better than nothing stuff that you get from the Democrats, right? So you can only buy one handgun every 30 days. The things aren't going to be, there's no title, registration, license, but if your gun is stolen, you have to report that. Or if your gun is lost, you have to report that.
Right.
It's stuff like that, which is better than nothing. But and of course, the Republicans responded immediately on the opening of this big special session to deal with this crisis by shutting it down within 2 hours, ending it, and declaring that they would do nothing.
Yeah, worse than nothing, actually. So you said DIY, as in do it yourself, DIY.rootsaction.org?
Yeah, this was a petition I put up sort of as an individual, although I work for rootsaction.org on our do-it-yourself site, which people use all the time. It's DIY.rootsaction.org. You make a petition and promote it, and hopefully we'll help you promote it.
Right. That's great. That's great. And as I said, there's a link from our Facebook page as well over at Facebook, whatever it is. So what are you getting feedback about these ideas? I've noticed that at least one member of Congress has now called for licensing of all gun owners. Another member of Congress, I'm sorry, I don't have the names right on the tip of my tongue. I've just caught these stories kind of on the fly over the last few weeks while I was on book tour. Another one has called for insurance for gun owners. I'm not sure that they're reading my book. I've been talking about this stuff on the radio for at least a half a decade, maybe a decade. Just that simple idea of regulating guns like cars, as a way of allowing for rational gun ownership. I mean, I talk in the book about, one of my brothers is a gun enthusiast, and I like to go target shooting with him, and he's a vegetarian. I mean, so it's not like hunting and stuff, but we've got to find some kind of a middle ground where, I had a conservative call into my show a couple days ago. He came to my book signing in Chicago, I think it was, and, I gave a talk on this, and he was like, hey, I'm a conservative, I own guns, and I think your proposals are entirely reasonable. So what kind of feedback are you getting?
Well, that's what I would expect, and you probably noticed as well that Senator Cory Booker, who by the way I wouldn't elect a dog catcher, proposed something quite similar in a presidential debate. So there are some people picking up on these ideas or coming at them from somewhere. But in response to our petition, there are a handful of comments on the webpage underneath, all supportive. We get a number of emails that are supportive, but mostly we get people signing the petition. And 5,000 is a very good start. And I'm sure another 5,000 will sign it. The question is, can we get the governor of Virginia, or can we get anyone else in power around the United States or in Washington to actually act? Right. Because we've got the Republicans openly and shamelessly owned by the gun lobby, and the Democrats unwilling to do anything particularly significant, even when they're treating it as a major, urgent, personal.
Well, in the case of Virginia, you've got Republican control of the lower chamber, so the Democrats can't pass legislation. In the U.S. Congress, it's the same thing with the Senate. So even if they were inclined, but. Up to this point, it's been. I think, frankly, the Democratic Party has been intimidated by the NRA for a couple of decades now, and and the Republican Party, of course, is embraced by the NRA. But I also get the sense that that is going away. That the tobacco industry, living, being the political animal that you are, I'm sure you're familiar with this. That in the late '90s, the most powerful lobby in the United States was the tobacco lobby. Nobody crossed the tobacco lobby. Mike Pence was writing op-eds about how tobacco doesn't cause cancer and publishing them in newspapers. They owned everybody, and Democrats, Republicans, right across the board. Nobody was willing to do anything. And then in the '90s, these lawsuits came out and showed that not only did this industry kill 500,000, or I think it was 450,000 Americans a year in the late 90s, but they knew that they were doing it, and they had known that they were doing it since the 40s. They had known that nicotine was addictive since the 30s, and they had just been hiding this, covering it up. Now we're seeing, between lawsuits and good publicity from the Parkland kids to Gabby Gifford's group, we're realizing that the NRA and the weapons, the death industry, the weapons manufacturing industry, are just as corrupt as the tobacco industry was, and arguably even more corrupt. I mean, this is explicitly killing people. You don't even have the pleasure of getting high from a gun like you can from a cigarette. So it seems to me like within 5 years we're going to be looking back at the NRA the same way that by 2002 or 2003 we were looking back at the tobacco lobby and saying, now they're just noise in the background. What do you think?
Well, I very much hope so. I don't dare make the prediction, and I don't dare suggest that nobody gets high from their guns. Some of these people certainly seem to.
Yeah, that's true.
But there is a difference that the killing is not secret. It's not as if we can have the revelation that they knew guns were killing people. Everyone has always known the guns are killing people, and yet it's justified and accepted somehow. I hope that the trend you're seeing is correct, and that it goes after not just the guns domestically, but the weapons that are sold to militaries and dictatorships and democracies and the Pentagon all around the world.
It's become our major export. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's become our major export, and that's a crime in and of itself. David Swanson, rootsaction.org. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Tom.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Greg in Webster, South Dakota. It says here you want to disagree with me. What's up, Greg?
Well, after World War II, if they had returned to a Republican administration that said we must have austerity and pay off our war debt, it would have killed the economy.
You're absolutely right.
The GI Bill and the spending on infrastructure that gave the men jobs to buy cars and fuel the economy.
Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower borrowed additional money after World War II, and we were in debt after World War II to the point of about 110% of GDP, which is about where we are right now. We were massively in debt, and they borrowed additional money to stimulate the economy, to build, not even to stimulate the economy. That wasn't their goal. Their goal was to put America back to work, and it worked. It absolutely worked. So, Greg, I don't see what we're disagreeing about.
Well, you said it was the pent-up demand, but it wasn't really the demand. It was the ability to buy stuff. They could have had the want for things, but if they came back to a country with austerity and no jobs or no college, they wouldn't have had the means.
Yeah. Okay. I suspect we're saying the same thing, but your point is well taken. Thank you very much for the call, Greg.
Okay,
great. Yeah, good to hear from you. Rick in Gig Harbor, Washington, listening on 91.3 FM. Hey, Greg, what's up?
Hi, Tom.
Rick, excuse me.
My frustration is all the lying and corruption, and so here's my question. Is there any way Congress can sit down and put together some sensible laws against it? I mean, if you go to court, you swear to tell the truth. If you're holding a public office, you swear to hold the rules and regulations of whatever it is you're doing. Can't they just add in that and if you lie to the American people, it's perjury.
Yeah.
And put some laws together because we're just so confused out here. We don't know who's telling the truth, who isn't. They say, Supreme Court says, well, it's up to the people who hear the story to go check it out.
Right.
There's too many places with too many different opinions. It's crazy to try to find the true answer on the internet. So why don't we just pass a law that says if you blatantly lie, you can be held accountable, big fines, prison, or
here's the reason why we don't pass that law, Rick. The Supreme Court, when it comes to freedom of speech, the type of freedom of speech that they have most aggressively protected, literally since the founding of the Republic, has been political speech. And the reason why is because in politics, there are many areas where there's a lot of gray area. I mean, Reagan came along and said, if we have these free trade deals, I mean, he was negotiating NAFTA. If we have these free trade deals, it's going to build the Mexican middle class, which will create demand for exports from the United States, so it'll all work out. Or our tax cuts will pay for themselves because they'll stimulate the economy. And therefore, the extra economic activity will generate more revenue for the IRS. Turns out they weren't true. But a lot of people believed them to be true at the time. And how do you know the politician who knew that it was a lie versus the politician who actually listened to Reagan and believed it? Now, I don't think that we want to live in a country where we are enforcing political speech. I think that's the most dangerous turn we could take.
I'm talking about if you specifically lie about something you knew was a lie when you said it.
Right.
And then you're not held accountable.
But the enforcement of that becomes a real challenge. Rick, the answer is you hold people accountable. This is why we need a free press, and it's why we need an independent press, because the answer to that is you hold politicians accountable in the media. Rick, I get what you're saying, and I get your frustration. I share it. Thank you. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check. Just an amazing story here. Hunter over at Daily Kos writes, and he says it so brilliantly that I'm not even going to try to give you my interpretation of it. There's a stripper auction going on at one of the Trump properties, the Doral down in Florida. Right? On Saturday, the President of the United States' private for-profit business is hosting a golf tournament in which the selling premise is golf with a stripper. You get to bid for the stripper that you want to be your caddy. He says, let's pretend for a moment, let's just say President Jimmy Carter owned a private club discovered to be hosting stripper golf caddy services. Let us imagine President Bill Clinton, during his first years in office, had a side business that dabbled in the occasional stripper auction. Let your mind wander over the response President Barack Obama, the subject of frothing outrage for the school he attended when he was 6 years old, was, as president, making a few extra bucks on the side, pairing wealthy golfers with the nude dancers of their choosing. The Republican Party, Hunter writes over at Daily Kos, to use the scientific term for these things, would have gone ape, shall we say crap. Senator Lindsey Graham would literally die. He would literally keel over and die from the scandal of it all. Old Newt Gingrich would climb to the top of the Capitol dome and cling there screeching until staff dislodged him with a broom handle. All the Republicans who have written extremely self-regarding books on morality and family values and what is wrong with these kids today would go on television crying so many very sincere tears They would refill the Ogallala Aquifer with enough left over to supply Marco Rubio with a few bottles to spare, and all saying, how will we explain this to the children? And Senator Mitch McConnell, who is to legislation what Jeffrey Epstein is to money management, would be very, very certain that this was not just an impeachable offense, but a threat to the very foundation of the republic. Amazing. A stripper auction on the property of our president. It just doesn't get weirder than that. Gordon in Wheaton, Illinois. Hey, Gordon, what's on your mind today? Gordon? I'm not hearing Gordon. Let's try Jill in Great Falls, Montana. Jill, you're on the air.
Oh, boy. Let me pick my jaw up off the floor first.
Yeah, stripper auctions and Trump properties. Beat that, Jill.
Okay, Tom. I want to talk about the Fox brainwashing machine.
Yes.
If
I can just interrupt you for a moment, Jill, for people who just tuned in, and this is the thing on radio, every 15 minutes, basically, about a third of your audience rolls over. And so for people who don't know what Jill and I are talking about, somebody called earlier and talked about how her father has gone into a facility for people with dementia, and her mother's home alone. Her mother's apparently in her 80s, and has started watching Fox News and has undergone a complete personality shift and has turned into a screeching, freaked out, frightened, we've got to, kill the Muslims and look out for those black people and all this kind of stuff that you get out of Fox News. And she's like, what can you do? Back to you, Jill.
Right. Thank you, Tom. I just wanted to point out, I have a friend that doesn't even have a TV, and she listens to religious radio all day and all night. And she just is discombobulated as the people that watch Fox continuously.
Yeah, well, this is, Jerry Falwell, Franklin Graham, Jerry Falwell and his pool boy, they're all singing the praises of Donald Trump all the time, because Trump said that if they involve themselves in politics to, help him get elected, help Republicans get elected, he'll make sure that the IRS doesn't enforce the law against being political and maintaining your IRS tax exemption.
Right.
That's what's going on. They're being bought off by, or bribed basically by Trump.
Yes. Well, I just wanted to, I'm not defending Fox or feeling sorry for them for getting blamed, but there's a myriad of other ways that people are being brainwashed.
Yeah.
Today, and the religious radio is one of them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Jill, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. And, it's a big one, actually. It's funny, back when I was in my early 20s, I used to listen to religious radio, and it was completely apolitical. And in fact, I found much of it very inspiring. That's not been, the last time I tuned into a religious station, though, what I was hearing was right-wing drivel. It was really pretty shocking. So, anyhow, Joey in Springfield, Missouri. Hey, Joey, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Tom. I've been wanting to say this for a long time. I really like the idea of, putting insurance on when you're buying a gun and everything to make give responsibility. But the problem I find with that, and I don't know how to get around that, is that whenever you have a car and you buy auto insurance, they base your premiums on your credit scores. And it doesn't matter if you've never had an accident, if you've never had a ticket or anything else. If you don't have a good credit score, you pay almost
well, then you could
double.
you could just add to the law that I didn't know that that's the case, and I'm not sure that is the case. I know that Louise and I moved from a smart car to a Prius plug-in hybrid, and my insurance rates went down a couple $100 a year because the new car is so much safer than the other car. But if my credit score hasn't changed in years. But you can just write into the legislation that you can't base it on credit score. You've got to base it on history. Joey, thanks for the call.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be right back. It's coming up on, it's hitting the bottom of the hour, coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. It's the Mueller report. This is from page 151. According to Nader, Dmitriev was very anxious to connect with the incoming administration and told Nader that he would try other routes to do so besides Nader himself. Nader did not ultimately introduce Dmitriev to anyone associated with the incoming administration during Dmitriev's post-election trip to New York. In early December 2016, Dmitriev again broached the topic of meeting incoming administration officials with Nader in January or February. Dmitriev sent Nader a list of publicly available quotes of Dmitriev speaking positively about Donald Trump in case they were helpful. Subtopic C, Eric Prince and Kirill Dmitriev meet in the Seychelles. Subtopic, George Nader and Eric Prince arrange Seychelles meeting with Dmitriev. Nader traveled to New York in early January 2017 and had lunchtime and dinner meetings with Eric Prince on January 3, 2017. Nader and Prince discussed Dmitriev. Nader informed Prince that the Russians were looking to build a link with the incoming Trump administration, redacted by Bill Barr. He told Prince that Dmitriev had been pushing Nader to introduce him to someone from the incoming administration, redacted by Bill Barr. Nader suggested, in light of Prince's relationship with transition team officials, that Prince and Dmitriev meet to discuss issues of mutual concern, redacted by Bill Barr. Prince told Nader that he needed to think further about it and to check with transition team officials. After his dinner with Prince, Nader sent Prince a link to a Wikipedia entry about Dmitriev and sent Dmitriev a message stating that he had just met, quote, with some key people within the family and inner circle, a reference to Prince, and that he had spoken at length and positively about Dmitriev, page 152. Nader told Dmitriev that the people he had met had asked for Dmitriev's bio, and Dmitriev replied that he would update and send it. Nader later received from Dmitriev 2 files concerning Dmitriev. One was a 2-page biography. The other was a list of Dmitriev's positive quotes about Donald Trump. The next morning, Nader forwarded the message and attachments Dmitriev had sent him to Prince. Nader wrote to Prince that these documents were the versions, quote, to be used with some additional details for them, parenthesis, with them referring to members of the incoming administration. Prince opened the attachments at Trump Tower within an hour of receiving them. Prince stated that while he was at Trump Tower that day, he spoke with Kellyanne Conway, Wilbur Ross, Steve Mnuchin, and others while waiting to see Steve Bannon. Cell site location data for Prince's mobile phone indicates that Prince remained at Trump Tower for approximately 3 hours. Prince said that he did not recall whether during those 3 hours he met with Bannon and discussed Dmitriev with him. And the rest of that paragraph, it was blacked out by Bill Barr. Prince booked a ticket to the Seychelles on January 7, 2017. The following day, Nader wrote to Dmitriev that he had a, quote, pleasant surprise for him, namely that he had arranged for Dmitriev to meet a special guest from the new team, referring to Prince. Nader asked Dmitriev if he would come to the Seychelles for the meeting on January 12, 2017, and Dmitriev agreed. The following day, Dmitriev sought assurance from Nader that the Seychelles meeting would be worthwhile. Blocked out. Next part is blocked out by Bill Barr. Dmitriev was not enthusiastic about the idea of meeting with Prince, and that Nader assured him that Prince wielded influence with the incoming administration. Page 153. Nader wrote to Dmitriev, this guy Prince is designated by Steve Bannon is designated to meet you. I know him and he is very well connected and trusted by the new team. His sister is now a minister of education. According to Nader, Prince had led him to believe that Bannon was aware of Prince's upcoming meeting with Dmitriev, and Prince acknowledged that it was fair for Nader to think that Prince would pass information on to the transition team. Bannon, however, told the Mueller office that Prince did not tell him in advance about his meeting with Dmitriev. Subtitle 2, the Seychelles meeting. Dmitriev arrived with his wife in the Seychelles on January 11, 2017, and checked into the Four Seasons Resort, where Crown Prince Mohammed and Nader were staying. Prince arrived that same day. Prince and Dmitriev met for the first time that afternoon in Nader's villa with Nader present. The initial meeting lasted approximately 30 to 45 minutes. Next paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. Prince described the 8 years of the Obama administration in negative terms and stated that he was looking forward to a new era of cooperation and conflict resolution. According to Prince, he told Dmitriev that Bannon was effective, if not conventional, and that Prince provided policy papers to Bannon. And the entire rest of page 153 was blacked out by Bill Barr. The first part of page 154, the first third, was blocked out by Bill Barr, except for one sentence. The topic of Russian interference in the 2016 election did not come up. The next sentence was blocked out by Bill Barr. Then Prince added that he would inform Bannon about his meeting with Dmitriev, and that if there was interest in continuing the conversation, Bannon or someone else on the transition team would do so. And then the rest of that paragraph blocked out by Bill Barr. Afterwards, Prince returned to his room where he learned that a Russian aircraft carrier had sailed to Libya, which led him to call Nader and ask him to set up another meeting with Dmitriev. According to Nader, Prince called and said he had checked with his associates back home and needed to convey to Dmitriev that Libya was, quote, off the table. Nader wrote to Dmitriev that Prince had received an urgent message that he needs to convey to you immediately, and arranged for himself, Dmitriev, and Prince to meet at a restaurant on the Four Seasons property. At the second meeting, Prince told Dmitriev that the United States could not accept any Russian involvement in Libya because it would make the situation there much worse. And the rest of that page is blocked out by Bill Barr. Page 155, the first paragraph, blocked out by Bill Barr. After the brief second meeting concluded, Nader and Dmitriev discussed what had transpired. Dmitriev told Nader that he was disappointed. It's the Mueller report. You know, every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Hartmann. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Hot goings on in the world of the internet. Evan Greer, the Deputy Director of Fight for the Future, fightforthefuture.org, is on the line with us. Evan, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Tom. It's been a minute. Good to talk to you.
Great to have you back with us. So, facial recognition surveillance. First of all, you want to define some terms here?
Sure thing. So, facial recognition is a type of biometric surveillance where law enforcement or a private corporation essentially scans your face and then can match it against a database of photographs that they have. And of course, there's all kinds of databases of photographs, including the ones that the DMV collects for driver's licenses, but also ones that, for example, Facebook is assembling as we all upload massive amounts of our own photos willingly to those types of corporate platforms. So this is a type of surveillance technology that has the potential to become incredibly ubiquitous and essentially allow governments to track their own populations everywhere that we go, assembling profiles of our religious beliefs, our political associations, more or less everything about us, because we can't leave our faces behind when we leave our homes.
And I know in China and frankly in the UK as well, although China and the UK use this information differently. There's pretty much no place you can go, at least in any of the cities, where you're not continuously 24/7. Well, not in your bedroom presumably, but although who knows if you've got a smartphone or a computer with a camera in it, where you're not under surveillance. I mean, every street has street corner cameras there, and they're not just used for traffic; they're used for facial recognition to track people. How far along is the United States in having that kind of public infrastructure, publicly owned infrastructure available to police and government, that actually should be a legitimate concern for us?
So that reality is really just around the corner unless we do something about it. And this technology is spreading incredibly quickly. The tech industry is being very aggressive at marketing it and selling it to law enforcement agencies. And law enforcement agencies are hungry for it. They want more power. They want more control. They want more ability to monitor people and track them. And frankly, a lot of like local police chiefs and stuff, they just want to be able to brag and say, we have all the coolest new toys that are available on the market. And so, that is happening despite the fact that facial recognition is repeatedly shown to be incredibly inaccurate. One study showed that the type of facial recognition you just mentioned happening in the UK was inaccurate up to 98% of the time. And what's worse, those inaccuracies aren't the same for everyone. An MIT study showed that facial recognition surveillance disproportionately and systematically misidentifies people of color and women, which has real-world consequences. This isn't just like, oops, the machine made a mistake. That mistake could land an innocent person in prison, could subject someone to police harassment or detainment, or have someone hauled in for questioning, just because a cold, inhuman algorithm basically pointed at them and said, that person looks like a criminal.
So we know that facial recognition is already being used on some of these platforms. What do we do about it? What's the proposed? And also, government is using this. In fact, one of the big stories just in this last week is that both ICE and the FBI apparently have been accessing the databases of photographs from DMVs, from Departments of Motor Vehicles, on a state-by-state basis. And we don't know what they're doing with that information. But the states that allow driver's licenses to people who are not citizens and specifically flag them as not being citizens, so they can't use that driver's license, for example, to vote. I'm not sure you could even use it to get on an airplane. Those states' databases are basically giving to ICE, here's all the people that we know are not documented citizens. So these stories are coming out. So what is your suggested remedy?
So my organization, Fight for the Future, just launched a brand new campaign yesterday at banfacialrecognition.com. We're the first organization that's calling for a complete and total federal ban on all forms of law enforcement and government use of facial recognition surveillance. And really, from my perspective, that's the solution here. The tech industry wants to skip the debate and totally, avoid talking about, should this technology even exist in the first place? Should law enforcement have these capabilities? They want to assume, yes, of course they should. Let's get to the question of how do we roll this out? How do we profit from it? And basically, how do we assuage people's fears? So that's why they're talking about regulation. From our perspective, there's no way to regulate this type of surveillance. It's surveillance that simply should not exist. I would put this on a short list of technologies like nuclear and biological weapons that simply the threats that they pose to a free and open society, to people's basic human rights, far outweigh any potential benefits that they could have. And they frankly simply shouldn't exist. If we could go back in time and prevent humans from ever developing nuclear weapons, wouldn't we do that? Well, we can't go back in time, but that's where we are with facial recognition right now, and that's why we're calling for the government to ban it.
Are you getting much purchase with this, much agreement? I mean, it seems to me like most Americans, you say facial recognition, and they just kind of shrug their shoulders or say, well, yeah, it's kind of cool how, my phone organizes my pictures.
Surprisingly, I would actually say that this is really resonating with a lot of people. I think there's something very visceral about the idea of having your face scanned and stored in a database that seems to be gripping people in a way that other forms of surveillance, like, for example, the National Security Agency's metadata or phone records collection programs, just didn't quite bubble up in the same way. And interestingly, we're also seeing bipartisan appetite in Congress to actually do something about this.
Well, that was my next question.
This is something, at an oversight hearing, a little while ago, you've got AOC and Jim Jordan from the Tea Party agreeing that this technology is inherently dangerous and grilling officials from DHS about it. So this is one of those things that really does cut across the political divide, and where I think there's, both tremendous threat, a clear and present danger posed by this technology spreading very quickly, but also tremendous opportunity. We've also seen a lot of momentum at the local level. San Francisco just became the first city in the country to ban local government use of this type of technology. Somerville, Massachusetts quickly followed suit, and now a number of other cities are considering it. Just today, legislation was introduced in Detroit to limit facial recognition surveillance there. So this is something that's growing and spreading in terms of a movement. But again, I think we're at a turning point. If we don't rise up as a society and say no, This is not acceptable. We don't want to live in a world. We don't want our children to live in a world where they are constantly being watched by their government and corporations at all times. If we don't rise up and say that, then that's the world that we're headed for, and we're headed there very quickly.
Evan Greer with Fight for the Future. And what's the website for the new banned facial recognition site?
It's bannedfacialrecognition.com, and you can fill out the form there and easily contact your local, state, and federal officials, calling on them to pass legislation to ban this dangerous technology.
That is marvelous. Evan Greer, thanks so much for being with us again, Evan. It's great talking with you.
Always great, Tom. Thanks so much.
Yep. Have a great day. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. It's 43 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Hey, the latest news here out of the DNC War Room. Drug company hikes prices by 909%, despite Trump's promises. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Meanwhile, it looks like the Epstein's heat is getting to Trump. He's throwing, in my opinion, he's throwing Acosta to the wolves. We'll see how this plays out, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. And welcome back. Elizabeth in West Hollywood, California. Hey, Elizabeth, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. When you were speaking about the party at Mar-a-Lago, a plane flew over, and I didn't hear the whole thing. But I saw the...
it's actually at Doral, which is his other club in Florida. And it's a party where it's a golf club. And they're bringing a bunch of strippers in, and the men will be able to bid on which stripper they want to be their caddy when they go out and play the golf tournament.
Well, this is different than what I heard on MSNBC last night. I was just flipping around the stations, and he came, McDonald came on, and he was talking about Epstein. And he said that he had a party at Mar-a-Lago. Oh yeah, this is happening in the next week or so. The Mar-a-Lago stuff is a couple of years ago. Yeah, back to you. I'm sorry. Yeah, but he flew in like 22 or 24.
28.
I don't remember the exact.
28 girls for Epstein and Trump, just the two of them.
Just the two of them. So what does that say? Trump is a pedophile.
Well, we don't know the age of the girls that were flown in, but if Jeffrey Epstein was there were probably some youngins, and they were all coming because they were looking for modeling opportunities. So these were the most beautiful girls out there, and they were, hungry is not quite the right word, but they very much wanted to be successful models, and they thought they were being presented to wealthy men who owned. Well, actually, at that point in time, Trump and Epstein both owned modeling agencies. Epstein's, when Epstein made his modeling agency, he told the guy running it, model it after Trump's modeling agency. And of course, Trump, some of the stories suggest that Trump was using his modeling agency as an opportunity to hit on women. In fact, it was at Model Week that he met Melania. He was trolling for a third wife, apparently, among models when he came across Melania, who came over here, apparently illegally working as a model.
Yeah, well, he's a pervert. What can I say?
Yeah. And that's a good description. Elizabeth, thank you very much. I think you nailed it. Brian in Aurora, Illinois. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Good.
Got a question for you. Why do you think Republicans are so much better at basically branding their message? Along the lines, the scene from Vice, I don't know if you've seen it at the end with the focus group where they're taking estate tax and turning it into death tax.
Right.
How come they're much better at saying things like, illegal aliens over asylum seekers?
There's a very, very simple reason. The Republicans have to lie in order to get elected. I mean, lying, there's a great piece about this over in Raw Story today, and I've written about it as well. The Republicans have nothing to offer working people. They have nothing to offer minorities. They have nothing to offer women. Their entire sales pitch is either to fundamentalist crazies, bigots, or rich people. And so they have to lie. So they hire really, really competent people, like Frank Luntz, who figure out how to lie really effectively. The Democrats believe in governance. They want to run a government that actually serves the people, and they are committed not to lying. So the Democrats, sadly, think that telling the truth is always enough. And the Republicans, sadly, cynically, understand that the truth is irrelevant if you can get people to believe what you're saying. And so the Republicans put an enormous amount of time, effort, and money into their lies. And the Democrats don't put a lot of money and time and effort into messaging because they're putting all that time and effort into governing. And Brian, I share your concern about it. Welcome back. 48 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. Richard in Plainfield, Illinois says you disagree with me about Fox News?
I definitely disagree with you about Fox News. I watch a little tiny bit of Fox News. I don't watch it all day long. I don't watch Sean Hannity and whatnot. But MSNBC and CNN can turn a person who is completely rational into somebody who you cannot even have a conversation with unless you are so politically correct. You literally parse every single word, not just your sentences, every single word, because if you use one thing
Richard,
wrong,
you're telling me that you just can't use the N-word in front of people who watch MSNBC, is that?
You couldn't have proved my point any better.
Yeah.
That was an absolutely
I'm so sorry to hear,
response to a
Richard, that you're having such a terrible time. I get it. Being a snowflake is tough. But anyhow, Gordon in Wheaton, Illinois. Hey, Gordon, what's on your mind today?
Hi there. Attempt number 2 here. A long time ago, you said something about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. You said that, I think it was union leaders came to him and said, we want you to do this and this and this and this. And he said to them, that's great. I agree with everything you said. Now make me do it.
Yeah, I didn't say that. Story's been floating around forever. I can't vouch for the veracity of it, but it's out there, certainly.
I wonder if that's where Nancy Pelosi is.
That's absolutely where she is. She keeps making the point that not even half of her own caucus is in favor of impeachment. And that's why Mark Pocan, Congressman Pocan, in the first hour of our program today was saying, if you want Nancy Pelosi to launch an impeachment inquiry, she's got to get more than 50% of Democrats behind her, which means you need to call your representative.
Yeah, and the representatives need to do a better job of going out and talking to the people. And we that know that impeachment, those of us who know that impeachment is the right thing, we need to go and convince people.
Yeah.
To be upset about it.
Well, I think the first people that we need to convince are, we've got 80 so far there are 220 some odd Democrats in the House of Representatives, and 80 of them have said yes. So, there's another 50 more or less that we need to reach out to immediately. And the number for Congress is 202-225-3121. And, call your Democrat. I'm talking about Democrats now. Call your Democratic member of the House of Representatives, if you have one, and say, are you on board with impeachment? And if not, please do so and register this voter's sentiment on, in that direction, because that's what we've got to do.
Right.
Gordon, thanks a lot for the call. Susie in New York City. Hey, Susie, thanks for listening to WBAI.
Hey.
What's up?
Hey, Tom. So great show. I wanted to comment on the facial recognition and also the broader topic of privacy and how unaware as an overall society we are of that.
Yes.
For example, in New York, we have about 50,000 kiosks installed. They're supposed to be free Wi-Fi and all that, but they're really spy stations. Each kiosk has about 30 tracking devices installed, including cameras pointing in multiple directions, microphones, and you name it. And there's a lot of data collection going on. They're being managed by a private entity, and their terms of service agreement is so vague, like you could basically drive a truck through all the loopholes there.
So the city is hiring private contractors to run Wi-Fi stations so that people who are too poor to afford, broadband into their house can come in and use them without parking themselves at Starbucks forever. And presumably these places have, particularly because they're serving low-income communities and maybe homeless communities, they've got security that you're saying is being misused. Am I recharacterizing what you're saying?
I would think that would be the next step. We haven't seen any. Actually, no, we have seen evidence of that. There was a guy who went around to damage these stations because initially they said the cameras are not on.
Right.
But then they circulated, security footage of the guy doing this, and that proved that the cameras are on. Now, even worse, we have a commission on public information and communication, and it's chaired by the public advocate of New York City. And since this office was put in place, the public advocate has done zero, and we've called on the public advocate to do something about this and to actually start working with the commission.
I would think this would be the city council, Susie, if your concerns are legitimate, that these contractors are using their surveillance to spy on people's internet activity, and they certainly have that ability, particularly since the Republicans have now destroyed net neutrality. It's been over a year. So any entity whose computer you're using can literally get every password, or they could do it with a camera over your shoulder. That the city council would specify in the contract that this may not happen, or for that matter, they could even pass a law against it in New York City, and then those people would not only be subject to losing their contracts, they'd be subject to going to jail. That's where I would put the pressure.
They haven't, and we've called them on that as well. I mean, there's a group called the Privacy Board Advocates and Rethink Link NYC,
right.
And the office that's really in charge of this, that can point out and recommend policy on that, is COPIC, the Commission on Public Information and Communication. So there's a multi-prong approach there, but it's baffling how little attention it gets as a whole. And even now, the COPIC Twitter page, which is one of their very few online presences, they still have the name of the previous public advocate in there, so it hasn't even been updated. Like they're just there for decoration or something.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. I remember when I'm not going to say his name, but a former public advocate for New York City was the boss of a radio network that I was on, and I was surprised by how much of a there are things that they do, but in many ways it's also kind of a figurehead position. So, Susie, for people listening in New York City, pay attention. Susie's may well have an interesting point. I personally don't know about the details here. Dominic in Argyle, New York. Hey, Dominic, what's on your mind today?
Oh, good. How are you, Tom? I've called many times, as you know. I've even gone so far as to suggest you should run. We've differed on the Second Amendment right and where that all goes and so on. This new thing with the insurance.
Right.
I've heard you as an advocate for it. Can you tell me, and now I'd like to respond, can you tell me what would be the goal of having every gun owner have to, by mandate, purchase insurance?
It's liability insurance. The goal would be when you have a gun in your home, the risk of somebody dying in your home who is not a bad guy goes up 500%. So if one of those, if a neighbor kid comes over and finds your gun and accidentally kills himself or whatever, that family would not be left bereft. That's the main goal. It's the same reason that you have car insurance. Most people, when they get in accidents that kill other people, don't do it because they intend to kill somebody. It's an accident. That's the definition. And that's why we have liability insurance. That would be the primary goal. Okay. The secondary goal would be that the insurance companies would do something that we don't want government doing. We do not want, and this is conservatives, liberals, right across the spectrum, we do not want government looking into our private lives and determining whether or not we represent a risk of committing a crime or using a gun the wrong way. But there's an entire industry that does this for a living. It's the insurance industry. You want to buy life insurance? They're going to ask if you smoke. They're going to look into your life. You want to buy health insurance? You want to buy car insurance? They're going to ask you, how many DUIs do you have? So if you want to buy gun insurance and you've got 2 convictions for domestic violence, good luck, and good luck getting insurance, which would prevent you from having the gun. And that's the second reason. And Dominic, I'm sorry we're out of time. If you want to disagree with me on any of that stuff, call back on Friday and we'll do it. Anything goes Friday, we'll pick it up. I'm out of time. Anyhow, thanks so much for being with us today. Tomorrow I'll be broadcasting live from Netroots Nation in Philadelphia, and Friday I'll be doing a book signing there. So if you're in the neighborhood, drop by. And in the meantime, and wish me good flights. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It actually does require you, yes, specifically you, to get involved. So get out there, get active, tag. You're it. We'll see you tomorrow from Philadelphia.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
We say fight back!